The world outside has ceased to be a place of distinct shapes and has become instead a singular, heavy wash of deep indigo and slate gray. There is no horizon line tonight. The sky, burdened with the weight of unshed snow and ancient ice, presses down upon the earth until the two meet in a seamless, suffocating embrace of cold. It is a darkness that feels drawn by a heavy hand, thick strokes of charcoal layered over blue paper, smudged and softened until no sharp edges remain. The wind does not howl, it hums. It is a low, vibratory drone that resonates in the bones of the landscape, a sound that has existed since the cooling of the earth, constant and indifferent. It scrapes against the rough-hewn logs of the cabin walls, seeking entry, seeking to equal the temperature inside with the absolute zero of the void outside. Inside, the air is thick and still. It holds the silence like a physical object. The cabin is a small pocket of resistance against the encroaching frost, a single point of faint warmth in a universe of freezing stone. The light here is dim, a soft, hazy glow emanating from the hearth where the embers pulse with a slow, rhythmic fading. The light does not reach the corners. The corners belong to the shadows, deep and velvety, drawn with heavy pressure, hiding the rough texture of the wooden walls. The light only touches the center of the room, casting long, soft shadows that stretch and warp across the floorboards. The floor is worn smooth by generations of slow, shuffling feet, the wood grain polished to a dull sheen that catches the orange flicker of the firelight in brief, lazy reflections. The mother sits by the hearth. She is a stillness within the silence. Her form is draped in layers of heavy, dark fabric wool that has lost its color to time, becoming a shade of gray that merges with the smoke-stained air. She does not move. She does not rock. She simply exists, a monument to endurance, her breath visible as a faint, ghostly vapor that rises and dissipates into the upper darkness of the room. The air is cold enough that the warmth of the fire struggles to push past the hearthstone. It is a dry, biting cold that settles in the lungs, a cold that tastes of iron and old dust. She looks at her hands. They are resting on her lap, palms open, tracing the invisible heat radiating from the dying fire. Her skin is etched with the map of winter's past, lines of dry experience drawn in sepia and pale earth tones. The knuckles are swollen, the fingers stiff. There is a slowness to her very blood, a lethargy induced by the deep freeze that surrounds the house. She watches the ash settle on the logs. It falls like gray snow, microscopic flakes of consumed wood drifting down to join the bed of embers. Each flake is a moment of time turning into memory. The fire creates a soft hissing sound, the sap in the wood boiling away, a whisper of moisture escaping its prison of cellulose. In the corner of the room, far from the fire, stands the bed. It is a heavy wooden frame built from trees that grew when the sun was warmer, their rings wide and generous. Now the wood is dark and hard as stone. On the bed lies the sleeper. The shape is indistinct, a mound of stillness under a thin cover. The mother knows the cold is seeking the sleeper. She can feel the draft that snakes under the door, a ribbon of ice that crawls along the floorboards, searching for warmth to steal. It is a relentless, patient thief. It does not rush. It flows like water, filling every crack, every void, rising slowly to submerge the room in numbness. The mother begins to move. It is not a sudden action. It is a shift in gravity. She leans forward, her spine curving like a bow of yew, the heavy fabrics of her dress rustling with the sound of dry leaves sliding over stone. The sound is loud in the quiet room. It dominates the space for a moment, a friction of wool on wool. She places her hands on the arms of her chair, the wood polished and darkened by years of her grip. She pushes down. Her rise is gradual, a slow ascent against the pressure of the atmosphere. Her knees creak, a sound like old ships shifting in a frozen harbor. She stands. For a moment she pauses, steadying herself against the vertigo of the shadows. Her shadow stretches up the wall, a looming, soft-edged giant that reaches the rafters. She turns her head slowly towards the back of the room. There, stacked upon a heavy chest of oak, are the blankets. They are the history of this house. They are the archives of the sheep that grazed on hills now buried under glaciers. They are the labor of winters spent by the wheel, the rhythmic clack of the loom, the smell of lanolin and raw soap. They are heavy, they are dense, they are waiting. She takes a step. Her foot, encased in thick felted boots, meets the floor with a dull thud. The dust motes dancing in the shaft of firelight are disturbed, swirling in turbulent eddies before settling again. She takes another step. The journey across the small room feels like a crossing of a vast, frozen plain. The air gets colder as she moves away from the fire. The orange light fades, replaced by the blue-gray gloom of the room's periphery. She can smell the frost on the walls now, a sharp, metallic scent that stings the nose. The walls are coated in a thin layer of rime, delicate crystalline structures that grow in the dark, ferns and feathers of ice that bloom on the timber. She reaches the chest. The wood is cold to the touch, sucking the heat from her fingertips. She runs her hand over the stack of blankets. The texture is rough, coarse hairs of primitive wool that prickle the skin. These are not soft comforts, they are shields. They are armor against the night. She selects the first one. It is at the bottom of a smaller pile, a blanket of dark, mottled gray, woven with a tight, impenetrable weave. It smells of cedar and lavender, dried herbs placed in the folds years ago. Their scent now faint and dusty, a memory of a summer garden long dead. She grips the edge of the blanket. Her fingers curl into the fabric, finding purchase in the thick weave. She pulls. The blanket slides over the others with a heavy, rasping sound, a whisper of friction that speaks of weight and density. She lifts it. It is heavy. It hangs from her hands like a tapestry of lead. The weight of it pulls at her shoulders. It is a good weight. It is the weight of survival. She holds it to her chest for a moment, letting the fibers absorb the meager warmth of her body. She closes her eyes and listens to the wind outside. It has shifted slightly, a deeper note now, a bass vibration that shudders the roof. The snow is falling harder. She can sense it piling up against the north wall, a rising tide of white silence. She turns back towards the bed. The sleeper has not moved. The breathing from the bed is shallow and slow, the rhythm of hibernation. The mother moves towards the bed, the blanket draped over her arms like a ceremonial robe. She walks with purpose, but without haste. Haste belongs to the summer, to the time of insects and running water. Winter is the time of stone and slow roots. She reaches the side of the bed. The wood of the bed frame is carved with symbols of protection, simple geometric shapes worn smooth by touch. She traces one with her eye, a circle, a line, a circle, an endless loop. She leans over the sleeper. The air here is the coldest in the room. The draft from the window, sealed with rags and wax but still permeable to the bitter cold, falls directly here. She can feel the icy breath of the window on her cheek. It is a sharp contrast to the stale, still air of the rest of the room. She prepares to lay the first layer. This is the foundation. This blanket is the coarsest, the one that will trap the initial layer of air, the one that will hold the shape of the body. She unfolds the blanket. It opens with a soft, heavy flap, a sound like a bird shaking snow from its wings. The fabric is stiff with cold. She holds it suspended over the bed for a moment, a dark cloud hovering over the sleeper. The firelight catches the surface of the wool, revealing the chaotic, organic landscape of the fibers. Tiny hairs stick up, casting their own microscopic shadows. The weave is uneven, thick and thin threads intertwined, the hand of the maker visible in every irregularity. It is a landscape of gray hills and valleys, a terrain of warmth. She lowers the blanket. She does not drop it, she places it. She guides it down through the cold air until it touches the form of the sleeper. It settles with a sigh of displaced air. She watches as it contours to the body, draping over the shoulder, the hip, the legs. It is a heavy shroud. She reaches out and smooths the fabric. Her hand moves slowly from the top to the bottom, ironing out the wrinkles, ensuring there are no gaps for the cold to enter. The wool feels dry and scratchy under her palm. It has the texture of dry moss, of lichen on granite. She tucks the edges in. This is the most important part. The seal must be perfect. She pushes the stiff fabric between the mattress and the frame, her fingers working deep into the crevice. The mattress is filled with straw and dried heather, and it rustles softly as she works, a sound of dry fields in autumn. She works her way around the bed, a slow orbit. Tuck, smooth, press. Tuck, smooth, press. The rhythm is hypnotic. It is a ritual she has performed 10,000 times. It is the ritual that keeps the heart beating. She reaches the foot of the bed. The corners must be secure. She folds the heavy wool in a precise triangle, a hospital corner from a time before hospitals, a military precision born of necessity. She drives the fabric down, locking it in place. The blanket is now taut across the sleeper's feet, a rampart against the draft. She stands at the foot of the bed and looks at her work. The gray wool absorbs the light, appearing almost black in the dim room. It looks like a patch of freshly turned earth, dark and fertile and heavy. The mother breathes. Her breath clouds the air, hovering over the blanket before vanishing. The room feels slightly smaller now, the darkness pressing in a fraction closer. The fire pops, a sudden sharp crack that echoes like a breaking twig. A spark leaps from the hearth, a tiny shooting star that dies before it hits the floor. The shadows on the wall jump in response, a brief spasm of movement before settling back into their stillness. The mother turns her head back to the chest. There are more blankets, many more. The night is long and the cold is deep. One layer is not enough. One layer is never enough. She moves back to the center of the room towards the fire. She needs to warm her hands before the next retrieval. The cold of the wool has seeped into her bones. She holds her hands out to the embers again. The orange light illuminates the translucent skin, the blue veins that run like frozen rivers beneath the surface. She rubs her hands together, a slow, dry sound of skin on skin. The friction creates a ghost of heat. She looks into the heart of the fire. The red glow is mesmerizing. It pulses like a slow heartbeat, fading and brightening with the whim of the draft. It is the only living thing in the room besides her and the sleeper. The wind outside rises again. It buffs the walls, a physical blow that makes the timber groan. The mother does not flinch. She is part of the house. She is part of the wood and the stone. She knows the strength of the walls. They have stood against the white wind for longer than she has been alive. But she also knows the patience of the ice. The ice can wait. The ice has nowhere to go. It will wait until the fire dies, until the wood rots, until the wool disintegrates. Her task is to delay that inevitable victory. Her task is to wrap. She turns away from the fire. The shadows embrace her again. She walks back to the chest, her steps silent on the worn floor. The stack of blankets looms in the darkness, a tower of potential warmth. She looks at them, studying the textures, the colors that are barely visible in the gloom. There is a blue one dark as the midnight sky, a brown one the color of wet peat, a white one thick and fluffy as a cloud. She considers the order. The order matters. The density, the weight, the weave, each layer must complement the last. She reaches for the second blanket. It is the brown one. It is made of goat hair, coarser than the sheep's wool, oily and water-resistant. It smells of the animal, a musk that has never left the fiber. It is stiff, almost like felt. It will add weight. It will press the first layer down, sealing the air pockets. She grasps it. It feels dense, a slab of material rather than a fabric. She pulls it free. The sound is different this time. A deeper, throatier rasp as the rough hair drags over the wool beneath it. She holds it in her arms. It is heavier than the first. It blocks her view of the floor. She navigates by memory, by the feel of the floorboards under her boots. She knows where the knots in the wood are. She knows where the floor dips slightly near the center. She moves with the certainty of a ghost haunting her own life. She approaches the bed again. The first blanket lies smooth and gray, a flat, calm sea. She prepares to disturb it with the second wave. The air in the room seems to have thickened. The cold is a gelatinous presence, slowing every movement. To lift the blanket requires a deliberate act of will. She raises her arms. The brown fabric unfolds, casting a deep shadow over the bed. It looks like a piece of the earth itself, a sod of turf ready to be laid. The visual texture is rich and chaotic, full of knots and stray fibers that catch the faint light. It absorbs the shadows, drinking them in. She waits, she listens. The silence of the house is loud. It is a silence made of pressure. The snow piling against the door muffles the world outside, turning the wind's roar into a distant murmur. They are buried. They are deep beneath the surface of the winter. She is the keeper of the airlock. She is the guardian of the thermal barrier. She lowers the brown blanket. It lands with a dull, heavy thud devoid of resonance. It does not flutter. It falls flat, crushing the air beneath it. She begins the smoothing process again. Her hands are tools, broad and flat, ironing out the chaos. She pushes the brown hair against the gray wool. The two textures bite into each other, locking together. Friction is heat. Friction is life. She moves around the bed, the slow orbit of a moon around a planet. The floorboards creak under her weight, a sound that marks the passage of time. She reaches the head of the bed. She is careful near the sleeper's face. The nose and mouth are visible, a small island of flesh in a sea of fabric. The breath is a tiny rhythm, rising and falling. She tucks the blanket around the shoulders, creating a collar of warmth. She does not touch the skin. Her hands are too cold. She is a creature of the exterior, the sleeper is the core. She must not transfer her cold to the core. She works with the fabric, molding it, sculpting a cocoon. The brown blanket is secure. The bed now looks larger, a higher mound in the darkness. It looks like a barrow, an ancient burial mound, but this is a mound for the living. It is a mound designed to keep death out. The mother stands back. She evaluates the symmetry. It is good. The layers are even. The seal is tight, but the cold is still there. She can feel it on the back of her neck, a phantom hand resting on her skin. It is not enough. She looks at the window. The frost has grown since she started. The ferns of ice have merged, covering the glass in a thick, opaque cataract. The world outside is gone completely now. There is only the white blindness of the window and the dark interior. The room is a capsule floating in the void. She feels the isolation. It is not a lonely feeling, it is a solitary one. It is a feeling of singular purpose. There is nothing else to do but this. There is no other task. The world has shrunk to the size of this room, to the distance between the hearth and the bed. She returns to the fire. The routine is established. Heat the hands, check the fire, fetch the blanket. It is a cycle that mirrors the seasons but accelerated. The fire is the summer, the bed is the winter. She ferries the warmth from one to the other, carrying it in the texture of the blankets and the labor of her body. She adds a small log to the fire, just one. Wood is precious. It must last until the thaw, and the thaw is a myth, a story told to children. The log hisses as it touches the embers. A line of smoke rises, twisting like a gray snake, disappearing into the black throat of the chimney. She watches the smoke. It is the only thing that leaves the house. It is their signal to the indifferent sky that something still burns down here. She wonders if the smoke freezes as soon as it leaves the chimney, turning into gray ice, shattering in the wind. She turns back to the room. The shadows have shifted again. The light from the new log is brighter, sharper. It throws the texture of the floor into high relief. Every scratch, every dent in the wood stands out, a canyon of shadow. The room looks like a drawing in charcoal and sanguine, harsh and beautiful. She walks to the chest. The pile of blankets is slightly lower but still daunting. There are so many layers left, so many weights to add. She feels the fatigue in her legs, a heavy, watery sensation, but she cannot stop. To stop is to let the cold win. To stop is to let the draft find the gap. She reaches for the third blanket. It is patterned, a tartan of muted greens and blacks, woven from wool dyed with moss and bark. It is softer than the first two, a layer of insulation to trap the air warmed by the sleeper's body. She runs her fingers over the pattern. The crosshatch of the weave is familiar. She remembers weaving this one. She remembers the winter she made it. It was a cold winter, but not like this. Nothing was like this. She lifts the blanket. It is pliable, draping over her arm in soft folds. It has a fluid quality compared to the stiff goat hair. It is silent as she picks it up. She turns. The bed awaits. The sleeper awaits. The cold awaits. The mother takes a breath of the freezing air, steadying her heart. She begins the slow walk back across the room, the green and black wool flowing behind her like a royal train, a dark river of warmth flowing through the valley of the shadow. The wind hums its single, endless note. The house creaks. The night deepens, and she walks. The walk from the chest to the bed is a journey across a landscape of shadow. The floorboards, uneven and worn by the passage of time, rise and fall like the solidified waves of a dark wooden ocean. With every step the mother takes, the green and black tartan blanket draped over her arms shifts slightly, a heavy, fluid mass of wool that whispers against her dress. The sound is soft, a friction of dry fibers, barely audible over the low, constant drone of the wind outside. The wind is a presence that presses against the house from all sides, a heavy hand testing the structural integrity of the timber, seeking a weakness, a loose knot, a gap in the chinking. It finds none, but it does not stop searching. It rubs against the corners of the cabin, a sound like rough stone grinding on wood. The mother moves through the dim light. The fire in the hearth casts her shadow forward, a long, distorted shape that stretches across the floor and bends up the side of the bed. Her shadow holds the shadow of the blanket, a bulk that adds width to her form. She feels the cold air parting around her as she walks, a physical resistance, as if the atmosphere has thickened into a slush of invisible ice. The cold clings to her heavy skirts, dragging at her movement. It is a slow, wading sensation. Her breath comes in slow, measured plumes, white mist that curls over her shoulder and vanishes into the darkness behind her. She reaches the side of the bed. The brown goat hair blanket, the second layer, lies flat and rigid, a dark plateau of coarse texture. It has settled, compressing the gray wool beneath it, locking the initial warmth into a tight seal. But it is not enough. The air in the room is aggressive. It seeks to leach the heat from the sleeper, to pull it out through the layers of fabric and disperse it into the void. The third layer is needed. The third layer is the insulator. She pauses, holding the green tartan suspended. In the faint, flickering orange light of the embers, the colors of the wool are muted, deep, and subterranean. The green is the color of pine needles found beneath the snow, dark and resinous. The black is the color of charred wood. The pattern is a grid, a series of intersecting lines that speak of order and structure in a chaotic world. She looks at the weave. It is looser than the goat hair, softer. The yarn is spun with a higher twist, creating tiny pockets of air within the thread itself. These pockets are the trap. They will catch the warmth rising from the sleeper and hold it, creating a microclimate of survival. She lifts her arms higher. The blanket unfolds. It does not snap. It unfurls with a slow, heavy grace, cascading down like a silent waterfall of dark wool. The fringe at the edge brushes the floor for a second, picking up a few specks of dust before she raises it again. She centers the fabric over the bed. She uses the lines of the tartan to align the blanket, ensuring it is perfectly symmetrical. The vertical lines run parallel to the sleeper's spine. The horizontal lines run across the chest, the hips, the legs. It is a grid of protection. She lowers the blanket. It settles onto the brown goat hair with a softness that is almost soundless. There is no thud this time. There is only a hush, a gentle collision of textures. The soft wool meets the coarse hair and they grip each other. The friction between the layers is immediate. The green blanket does not slide. It stays where it lands, draping heavily over the mound of the body. The sleeper is now buried under 3 strata of history. The mother begins the smoothing. She leans over, her back protesting with a dull ache that is as constant as the cold. She ignores it. The ache is just a signal from the body, and the body is secondary to the task. She places her hands on the center of the blanket on the sleeper's chest. She can feel the shallow rise and fall of the breath through the 3 layers. It is faint, a distant tide, but it is there. She pushes her hands outward, moving towards the edges of the bed. Her palms slide over the tartan. The wool is warm to the touch, retaining the heat of the sheep that once wore it, a ghost of a summer pasture long gone. She works the fabric. She pushes the air out from between the layers. There must be no large gaps, no caverns where the cold can congregate. The layers must be intimate. She smooths the wrinkles, pressing them flat. The pattern of the tartan distorts slightly over the contours of the sleeper, the straight lines curving over the shoulder, dipping into the hollow of the waist. It is a topography of sleep. She traces the lines with her eyes, following the green stripe as it travels down the length of the bed, disappearing over the foot. She moves to the side of the bed. The tucking must be precise. The green blanket is wider than the brown one. It hangs lower, reaching closer to the floor. She gathers the excess material in her stiff fingers. The cold has made her knuckles swollen and hard, like knots in an old branch. She forces her hands to work. She lifts the edge of the mattress, a heavy, straw-filled sack that smells of dry grass and dust. She shoves the green wool underneath. She pushes it deep, wedging it between the mattress and the wooden slats of the frame. She packs it in tight. It is a seal. It is a gasket against the draft. She moves down the length of the bed. Tuck, push, smooth. The rhythm creates a trance. The world narrows down to the edge of the bed, to the junction of wool and wood. She watches her own hands as if they belong to someone else, detached tools performing a necessary function. The skin on her hands is pale, almost translucent in the gloom, contrasting with the dark wool. The veins are dark blue rivers flowing under the ice of her skin. She reaches the corner. She performs the fold again. The hospital corner. The military fold, the geometry of order. She pulls the fabric taut, creating a sharp crease. She tucks it under. The foot of the bed is now a solid wall of wool, impenetrable. She stands up and exhales. Her breath hangs in front of her face, a complex cloud of vapor that swirls and changes shape before dissolving. She watches it fade. It is a reminder of the temperature. The room is freezing. The fire is struggling. The logs are burning low, reducing themselves to a bed of pulsing red coals that offer light but little radiant heat beyond the hearthstone. The shadows in the corners of the room seem to have grown taller, leaning in towards the center, encroachments of the dark. She looks at the window. The frost is thicker now. The delicate ferns of ice have thickened into plates, overlapping scales of white mineral that completely block the night. There is no outside anymore. There is only the white wall of the window and the dark walls of the wood. The cabin is a sealed vessel drifting in a universe of ice. She listens to the wind. It has changed pitch again. It is higher now, a keening sound, a whistle that cuts through the logs. It sounds like a flute carved from bone, played by a giant with endless breath. It is a lonely sound. It is the sound of a world without people. She turns back to the fire. It is time to feed the guardian. She moves to the woodpile stacked against the wall near the hearth. The logs are dark, rough-barked, cured by years of dry air. They are cold to the touch, heavy with density. She selects a piece of oak, knotted and twisted. It is a slow-burning wood, a wood that fights the fire, yielding its energy reluctantly. She carries it to the hearth. She kneels. The movement is stiff, her joints clicking audibly in the quiet room. The floor is cold under her knees, the cold seeping through the layers of her skirts. She uses a rusted iron poker to shift the embers. The coals clink together, a sound like glass pebbles. She creates a hollow in the center of the bed of fire, a nest of heat. She places the oak log into the hollow. It settles with a soft hiss. The bark begins to smoke immediately, a thin, acrid gray ribbon curling up. She watches it. She waits for the catch. It takes a moment. Then a small blue flame licks up the side of the log, tasting the wood. The flame turns yellow, then orange. The log has accepted the fire. The light in the room flares briefly, pushing the shadows back a few inches. The colors of the room shift. The gray walls turn a warm brown for a second before fading back to slate. The green blanket on the bed glows with a momentary richness. The mother remains kneeling for a moment, letting the new heat touch her face. It is a stark contrast to the chill on her back. She is suspended between two extremes, the fire in front and the ice behind. She closes her eyes and imagines the heat soaking into her skin, penetrating the layers of clothing, reaching the bone. It is a dry, sharp heat. It smells of wood smoke and ash. It is the smell of safety. She opens her eyes. The duty calls. The third blanket is laid, but the cold is relentless. The draft is still moving along the floor, a serpent of ice seeking the bed. She must add more weight. She must add more density. She pushes herself up from the hearth. The effort makes her dizzy for a moment, the blood slow to reach her head. She steadies herself on the mantel, feeling the rough stone under her hand. She looks at the bed. It is a dark island in the room. The sleeper is still. The silence is heavy. She turns her gaze to the chest. The pile of blankets has diminished, but it is still significant. The next layer must be different. The next layer must be a barrier of a different kind. She walks towards the chest. Her shadow follows her, detaching itself from the hearth and trailing behind her like a dark cape. She reaches the stack. She runs her hand over the remaining fabrics. Her fingers are numb, the sensation in the tips dulled by the cold. She has to rely on the pressure, on the resistance of the material. She finds the fourth blanket. It is not woven, it is a quilt. It is a patchwork of heavy fabrics, remnants of old coats, scraps of velvet, squares of thick broadcloth, all stitched together with heavy waxed thread. It is padded with raw cotton, thick and lumpy. It is a chaotic, heavy object. It has no uniform color. It is a map of browns, deep reds, navy blues, and grays. It is a history of clothing, a history of people who are no longer here. It is heavy, heavier than the tartan, heavier than the goat hair. It is a dead weight. She grips the edge of the quilt. It is thick in her hands. She pulls. The friction is high. The cotton batting inside the quilt creates drag against the wool blanket beneath it. It slides off the pile with a muffled sound, a soft, heavy slump. She gathers it into her arms. It is cumbersome. It does not fold neatly. It bulges and bunches. It smells of camphor and old chests. It smells of time. She turns towards the bed. The weight of the quilt pulls her shoulders down. She feels the strain in her back. She walks slowly. Every step is a negotiation with gravity. The floorboards groan under the added weight. She is a beast of burden carrying the shield for the sleeper. The room seems to tilt slightly, the perspective warping in the dim light. The bed feels far away, across a vast expanse of shadowed floor. She focuses on the sleeper. The mound under the green tartan is still. The rhythm of the breath is the only clock in the room. In, out, in, out. A slow pendulum swinging in the dark. The mother matches her steps to the breath. Step, pause, step, pause. She is synchronized with the sleeper. She is the external extension of the sleeper's will to live. She reaches the bedside. The green tartan looks orderly, geometric. The quilt she holds is the opposite. It is organic, messy, thick. It is a chaotic layer to break the draft. She prepares to lift it. The quilt is large. It will cover the sides of the bed completely. It will touch the floor. This is good. It will create a tent, a sealed chamber within the room. She hovers the quilt over the foot of the bed. Her arms tremble slightly. The weight is significant. She takes a breath, holding the cold air in her lungs to brace her core. She creates a moment of stillness. The wind outside drops for a second, creating a vacuum of silence that rings in her ears. In that silence, she hears the settling of the house, the microscopic contraction of the wood as the temperature drops another degree. She casts the quilt. It does not float. It creates no breeze. It simply descends. It lands on the sleeper's feet first, then unrolls heavily up the body. The sound is a dull, muted whump, a sound of finality. The quilt covers the green tartan completely. The geometric order is gone, replaced by the chaotic patchwork of the quilt. The bed now looks like a heap of old clothes, a mound of discarded history, but it is warm. The cotton batting is a powerful insulator. It stops the movement of air. It creates a dead zone where heat can linger. The mother begins to unfold the edges. The quilt is stiff with age and cold. She has to force it open. She pulls the heavy flaps down the sides of the bed. They hang like heavy curtains reaching almost to the floor. This is the skirt of the bed. This blocks the underdraft. She kneels on the floor, ignoring the pain in her knees. She crawls along the side of the bed, pulling the quilt down, ensuring it hangs straight. She tugs at the hem. It is rough, bound with a thick cord. She pulls it until it is just an inch above the floorboards. She checks the corners. The quilt is too thick to tuck in the same way as the blankets. It must drape. It must encapsulate. She arranges the heavy folds at the corners, creating pillars of fabric. She ensures there are no openings. She crawls around the foot of the bed to the other side. The floor here is even colder, further from the fire. She can feel the ice radiating from the walls. She works quickly, her hands moving like spiders over the patchwork surface. Pull, straighten, drape. Pull, straighten, drape. She reaches the head of the bed. She is careful not to cover the face. The sleeper needs air, even if it is cold air. She folds the top edge of the quilt back, revealing the strip of green tartan, and below that the brown goat hair, and below that the gray wool. It is a geological cross-section of warmth. She pats the fold down. It is thick, a heavy collar around the sleeper's neck. She looks at the face of the sleeper. It is pale, relaxed. The breathing is unchanged. The layers are working. The weight is comforting. She stands up slowly, using the bedpost for support. Her knees crack. She brushes her hands on her apron. The sensation of the velvet and broadcloth lingers on her fingertips, a memory of different textures. She looks at the bed. It has grown significantly. It is a fortress now, a soft, heavy fortress, but the night is still young. The wind is still hunting. The fire is still consuming the wood. There are more blankets on the chest. She turns her head to the fire. The oak log is burning steadily now, a solid bar of orange heat. The light reflects off the frost on the window, creating faint, ghostly glimmers that move when she moves. The room feels tighter, the air denser. The pressure of the cold is a physical weight on her shoulders, pressing her down. She must continue. She must build the mountain higher. She walks back to the center of the room. She stops. She listens. Is that a new sound? No, just the wind changing direction, striking the chimney from a different angle. It creates a low, moaning sound in the flue, a voice of the storm. She shivers. It is an involuntary spasm that runs through her body, a ripple of cold. She wraps her arms around herself for a moment, hugging her own ribs. Her wool dress is thick, but it is not enough. Nothing is enough against this winter. She looks at the chest again. The shadows cling to it. The next blanket is waiting. She tries to remember which one it is without looking. Is it the red one? The heavy felt, the skin? She cannot remember. The cold dulls the memory. It strips away the details, leaving only the immediate need. The need for the next layer. The need for the next step. She unclasps her arms. She takes a step. The floorboard creaks. She takes another. She is a mechanism of survival. She is the wrapper. She is the mother of the blanket. She moves towards the chest, towards the waiting weight, ready to lift the next burden. The air swirls around her ankles, cold and biting, reminding her that the floor is a frozen lake and she is walking on thin ice. She reaches the chest. She looks down. The mother stands before the chest. The heavy oak lid is open, revealing the dark strata of the remaining blankets. They are packed tight, compressed by years of gravity and the weight of one another. The air around the chest is stagnant, a pool of cold that has settled in the lowest part of the room. It smells of cedar shavings and dried lavender, but the scent is frozen, a brittle perfume that barely registers against the sharp, metallic tang of the ice. She looks down at the next layer. It is a blanket of felted wool. It is not woven with a visible warp and weft. It is a solid mat of fibers, pounded and boiled and pressed until it became a single, unified sheet. It is the color of dried rust, a deep, dull red that absorbs the faint light rather than reflecting it. In the charcoal gloom of the corner, it looks almost black, a void within the wood. She reaches out. Her hand hovers for a moment, the fingers trembling with a fine, rapid vibration. It is the shivering of the muscles, the body's desperate, automatic attempt to generate heat. She wills the trembling to stop. She forces her hand to descend. Her fingertips graze the surface of the felt. It is rough, scratchy, and unyielding. It feels like the pelt of a beast that has slept in the stone for a century. It is cold. The cold transfers instantly to her skin, a shock that travels up her arm to her shoulder. It is a dry, biting cold, devoid of moisture. Grips the edge. The felt is thick, perhaps half an inch of solid wool. It does not bunch easily. She has to pinch it hard, digging her thumb into the dense material to get a hold. She prepares to lift. She widens her stance, planting her felt-clad feet firmly on the floorboards. She engages the muscles of her back. She pulls. The blanket resists. It clings to the layer beneath it, creating a suction of static and friction. With a low, rasping sound like sandpaper on wood, it slides free. The weight is substantial. It is a dead weight, dense and lifeless. Unlike the tartan, which had a fluid drape, or the quilt, which had a lumpy softness, this felt is a slab. It hangs from her hands in stiff, angular folds. It does not want to bend. It wants to remain flat. It is a stubborn material, born of harsh treatment and intended for harsh conditions. She gathers it against her chest. It smells of the dye vat, of iron and vinegar. It is a sharp, industrial smell that cuts through the musty atmosphere of the room. She turns slowly. The movement is a rotation of the entire body, her spine locked to support the burden. The room stretches out before her. The fire is a distant, pulsing eye in the wall of darkness. The bed is a looming shape, a mountain of fabric rising from the shadows. The distance between the chest and the bed feels immense, a frozen tundra of floorboards that she must cross. She takes the first step. The boot lands flat. The wood creaks, a long, drawn-out groan that echoes in the silence. The sound seems to travel up the walls, disturbing the stillness of the rafters. She walks. The red felt rubs against her chin, scratchy and irritating. She ignores the sensation. Sensation is a luxury. Survival is a necessity. She focuses on the firelight playing on the floor. The light is weak, struggling to penetrate the gloom. It casts long, spindly shadows from the legs of the table, from the chairs. The shadows look like grasping fingers stretching out to touch her as she passes. The air is thick with the cold. It feels as if she is walking through water, a heavy, viscous medium that slows her down. She reaches the center of the room. The heat from the fire brushes her left side, a brief, teasing warmth that vanishes as soon as she passes the hearth. The right side of her body remains in the grip of the ice. She is a creature of divided temperatures. She continues towards the bed. The sleeper is hidden beneath the quilt, a shapeless form under the chaotic patchwork. The quilt is lumpy, rising and falling in uneven peaks and valleys. The felt blanket will address this. The felt blanket is the leveler. It is the capstone. She arrives at the bedside. She stands there for a moment, breathing. Her breath comes in short, shallow gasps, visible as white puffs that drift over the bed. The exertion of carrying the dense wool has taxed her lungs. The air is thin and sharp. She looks at the quilt. The patchwork of colors, the browns, the blues, the grays, looks muted in the darkness. The quilt has done its job. It has trapped a layer of dead air. Now she must seal that layer. She must press it down. She lifts the felt blanket. It is awkward. It does not flow. She has to manhandle it, pushing it up and out. It blocks the light from the fire, casting a deep, rectangular shadow over the sleeper. It looks like a tombstone falling. She lowers it. She does not float it down. She places it. She lays it over the quilt, starting from the feet. She unrolls it, pushing the stiff roll of fabric up the length of the bed. It creates a sound like a heavy carpet being unrolled in an empty hall. Thump. Hush. Thump, hush. The felt settles over the quilt. It crushes the soft batting of the patchwork, compressing it. The lumps and bumps of the quilt are smoothed out, hidden beneath the uniform, rusty surface of the felt. The bed now looks solid, monolithic. It looks like a block of red stone carved into the shape of a bed. The chaos of the quilt is contained. The order is restored, but it is a brutal, heavy order. The mother begins the work of the edges. This is the hardest part with the felt. It does not want to tuck. It fights her. She has to use her body weight. She leans over the side of the bed, pressing her forearm against the edge of the mattress, forcing the stiff wool down. It resists, springing back up. She grunts, a low, involuntary sound in her throat. She pushes again, harder. She jams the edge of the felt between the quilt-covered mattress and the wooden frame. Her fingers ache. The cold has made the wood of the bed frame sharp and unforgiving. She scrapes her knuckles, but she does not stop. She wedges the fabric in, inch by inch. She moves to the foot of the bed. The corners are thick now. There are 5 layers of material bunched here: the gray wool, the brown hair, the tartan, the quilt, and now the felt. It is a massive accumulation of matter. She cannot make a neat fold. She has to crush the fabric together, overlapping the stiff layers, forcing them into submission. She uses her knee to hold the fabric in place while her hands work to shove the mass under the mattress. It is a physical battle. The bed creates resistance. The materials create resistance. The cold creates resistance. She succeeds. The foot is sealed. The felt is pulled taut, a flat plane of dark red stretching away from her. She moves to the other side. The draft from the window is stronger here. She can feel it washing over her back, a cascade of cold air falling from the glass. It makes the skin on her neck prickle. She shivers again, violently. She clamps her jaw shut to stop her teeth from chattering. The sound of chattering teeth is too loud, too human. The house demands silence. He attacks the second side. Tuck, push, wedge. The rhythm is slower now, more labored. Her energy is draining. The cold is a parasite feeding on her caloric reserves. She forces the felt down. The quilt beneath it creates a cushion, but the felt compresses it, squeezing the air out, making the seal airtight. She works her way up to the head of the bed. She leaves the top edge folded back, just like the others. The layers are now clearly visible at the neck of the sleeper. Gray, brown, green, patchwork, red. It is a rainbow of drudgery, a geological formation of warmth. She smooths the felt over the sleeper's chest. The surface is rough to the touch. It feels like dry moss. She presses down gently. She can still feel the breath, but it is fainter now, more distant. The layers are absorbing the movement. The sleeper is deep underground. The mother imagines the sleeper floating in a warm, dark ocean, far below the surface of the ice. That is the goal: to suspend the sleeper in a void of warmth, untouched by the winter. She stands back. She wipes her hands on her apron. Her palms feel raw. The wool has sucked the moisture from her skin. She looks at her handiwork. The bed is high now. It dominates the room. It is a dark altar in the center of the cabin. The red felt absorbs the orange firelight, turning it into a muddy brown glow. The shadows cling to the texture of the wool, creating a surface that looks pitted and scarred. She listens. The wind has not stopped. It has found a loose shingle on the roof. Tap, 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 a rhythmic, hollow sound like a finger tapping on a skull. It is an irregular rhythm, maddening in its lack of pattern. Tap, 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 tap. The mother looks up at the ceiling. The heavy timber beams are lost in the darkness. She cannot see the roof, but she can feel the weight of the snow on top of it. Tons of white crystals pressing down. The house is groaning under the load. A low creak comes from the corner, the sound of wood fibers stretching to their limit. She returns to the hearth. She needs the fire. She needs to see the light. She walks to the chair and sits heavily. The wood of the chair is cold, leaching the heat from her legs through the layers of her dress. She leans forward, extending her hands to the embers. The oak log she added earlier has burned down to a glowing charcoal skeleton. It retains the shape of the wood, but it is made of pure heat. It pulses with a deep, ruby light. She watches the pulses. They are slower than her heart. She reaches for the poker again. She disturbs the log. It collapses with a shower of sparks, a sudden cascade of orange glitter that swirls up the chimney. The sparks illuminate the back of the hearth, revealing the soot-stained stones, black as the night. She pushes the unburnt ends of the log into the center. She adds a handful of dry pine cones from a basket. They catch instantly, flaring up with a bright, crackling yellow flame. The sudden light is harsh. It throws the room into sharp relief. The mother looks around. The room is old. The walls are lined with tools of a forgotten life. A spinning wheel in the corner covered in dust, its wheel silent. A butter churn, the wood cracked and dry. bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, now gray and scentless skeletons of plants. Everything is suspended in the cold. Everything is waiting for a spring that might not come. The light from the pine cones flickers wildly, making the shadows dance a frantic jig. The shadow of the spinning wheel stretches and contracts, looking like a giant spider working in the corner. The mother watches the shadows. They are the true inhabitants of the house. She and the sleeper are just guests. The shadows were here before them, and they will be here after them. The cold owns the shadows. The cold hides in them. She looks back at the bed. The red felt blanket looks almost like a wound in the dim light, a dark scab over the sleeper. It is a necessary heaviness. She rubs her knees. The joints are stiff, grinding with a dry, sandy sensation. She is tired. A deep narcotic fatigue is pulling at her eyelids. It would be so easy to close her eyes, to sit here in the chair and let the fire die, to let the cold come and wrap her in its own blanket, the final blanket of ice. But she cannot. The sleeper needs her. The duty is not finished. The chest is not empty. She forces herself to look at the chest. It stands open, a gaping mouth in the gloom. There are still layers inside. There are still barriers to be erected. The wind taps on the roof again. Tap, tap. It is a reminder. The enemy is outside, and it is patient. It has all the time in the world. She has only the duration of the fire. She stands. The effort is greater this time. Gravity seems to have increased. She feels the pull of the earth, the drag of the heavy clothes. She steadies herself. She takes a step. The floor is colder than before. The draft is faster. The temperature is dropping. The night is deepening. She moves towards the chest. Her shadow leads the way, a dark harbinger of the work to come. She reaches the chest and looks down. The next blanket is waiting. It is lighter in color, a pale contrast to the dark felt. It is a blanket of raw wool, undyed, retaining the natural creamy white of the sheep. It looks like a patch of snow in the dark box. It looks soft. It looks deceptive. She knows it is heavy. She knows it is dense. She knows the labor it represents. She reaches out. Her hand is a pale shape in the darkness. She touches the wool. It is greasy with lanolin, a natural water repellent. It feels slick and cool. This is the blanket for moisture control. This is the blanket that breathes. She grabs a handful of the creamy fabric. She prepares to lift. The silence of the room presses against her ears, a high-pitched ringing that covers the sound of the wind. She takes a breath. The air tastes of stale smoke and frost. She begins the lift. The blanket rises. It is a ghost rising from a grave. It is a cloud being pulled from the sky. It unfolds with a soft, whispery sound. It is voluminous. It fills the space between her arms. She holds it up. It catches the dying light of the pine cones, glowing with a faint, spectral luminescence. It is the color of bone. It is the color of the winter moon. She turns. The bed is waiting. The red slab of the felt waits to be covered. The mother begins the walk, step, creak. The rhythm reestablishes itself. The loop continues. The night is a circle, and she is walking the circumference. She holds the white wool high, keeping it from dragging on the dirty floor. She is the bearer of the cloud. She approaches the sleeper. The cold watches her. The shadows watch her. The house waits. She stands at the foot of the bed. The red felt is dark and angry. The white wool is pale and calm. She prepares to lay the piece over the anger. She prepares to add the sixth layer. The halfway mark is past, but the hardest layers are yet to come. The heaviest weights are at the bottom of the chest. She knows this. She fears this. But she does not stop. She cannot stop. She lifts the white blanket higher, preparing to cast it. The motion causes the air to swirl, sending a few dust motes spinning into the firelight. They glitter like tiny stars before vanishing into the shadow. The mother looks at the sleeper's face one last time before the white wave descends. The expression is peaceful. The sleeper knows nothing of the cold. The sleeper knows nothing of the weight. The sleeper only knows the warmth. That is the mother's gift. That is her burden. The white blanket descends through the stagnant air, a pale phantom settling over the dark red landscape of the veldt. It lands with a hushed, breathy sound, the noise of soft, raw fibers collapsing against one another. It does not strike the bed with the dull thud of the quilt or the heavy slap of the veldt. Rather, it arrives like a sudden, heavy snowfall, blanketing the sleeper in a layer of creamy, organic silence. The contrast is stark. In the dim, ember-lit room, the bed has transformed from a dark, blood-colored mound into a drift of pale light, a spectral shape rising from the shadowy floor. The raw wool catches the faint orange glow from the hearth and diffuses it, seeming to hold a weak, internal luminescence, like moonlight trapped in a cloud. The mother stands at the foot of the bed, her hands empty now, hanging by her sides. She watches the white wool settle. It takes a moment for the fibers to relax, for the air trapped beneath the throw to escape. The blanket sinks slowly, conforming to the shape of the sleeper, outlining the ridge of the feet, the slope of the legs. It is a thick, unrefined textile. It has not been scoured of its natural oils. It is heavy with lanolin, the grease of the sheep still coating every strand. This is the waterproof layer. This is the barrier against the damp that comes with the deep cold, the moisture that condenses when warm breath meets freezing air. She moves to the side of the bed to begin the smoothing. Her boots scuff softly on the wood, a dry, rhythmic sound. She reaches out and places her palms on the white surface. The sensation is distinct. It is not dry and scratchy like the other wools. It is slick, waxy, and cool. The lanolin coats her fingertips immediately, a thin, organic film that smells powerfully of the animal. The scent rises in the cold air, a musk of the barn, of wet hay and huddled flocks. It is a primal smell, a scent of life and survival that cuts through the sterile, metallic odor of the frost. She pushes her hands across the surface. The raw wool has a frantic, curly texture, a chaos of tight ringlets that have been loosely spun and woven. Her hands slide over the bumps and hollows. She presses down, feeling the resistance of the 5 layers beneath. The bed is becoming a solid object. The softness of the initial layers is being compressed into a dense strata of insulation. She pushes the white wool towards the center, ensuring it overlaps the red felt completely. No red must show. The seal must be absolute. The white must conquer the red. She reaches the edge. The tucking is becoming a feat of strength. The mattress is now buried under inches of heavy fabric. To lift the edge requires her to wedge her fingers deep into the crevice between the bedding and the wood, fighting the pressure of the layers above. She grips the thick, greasy hem of the white blanket. She bends her knees, the joints protesting with a dry click. She shoves the fabric under. She has to use the heel of her hand, driving the material into the gap with short, sharp thrusts. Thud. Thud, thud. The sound is muffled, absorbed by the mass of the bed. She works her way down the side. The white wool bunches at the corners. It is bulky. It does not want to fold into neat angles. It wants to remain a rounded, organic shape. She forces it. She gathers the excess material in her fist, twisting it tight, and jams it under the mattress. The corner becomes a hard, rounded knot of wool, a bumper against the draft. She moves to the foot of the bed. She repeats the process. The cold air near the floor wraps around her ankles, stinging the skin through her thick stockings. She ignores it. She is focused on the seal. The white blanket must be tight. It must be a skin. She moves to the far side, the side of the window. The cold here is aggressive. It falls from the glass in a silent, invisible cataract pooling on the floor. She can feel the temperature difference on her face, a sharp gradient from the fire-warmed air to the window-chilled air. She works quickly here. Her breath clouds around her head, a thick fog that obscures her vision for seconds at a time. She pushes the white wool under. The lanolin makes the fabric slippery, and her numb fingers struggle to keep a grip. She has to reset her hold multiple times, digging her nails into the weave. Finally, it is done. The side is sealed. She moves to the head of the bed. She folds the top edge of the white blanket down. The collar of warmth around the sleeper's neck is growing higher. The cross-section of layers is a timeline of her labor: gray, brown, green, patchwork, red, and now white. A sandwich of textures. She pats the fold down, compressing it so it does not cover the sleeper's nose. The sleeper is deeply buried now. The face is a pale oval in a crater of heavy fabrics. The breathing is slow, rhythmic, barely disturbing the heavy collar of wool. The mother watches for a moment, checking for the rise of the chest. It is faint, but it is there. The heart still beats under the mountain. She steps back. She wipes her hands on her apron. The lanolin leaves a dark stain on the fabric, a grease mark that will never wash out. She rubs the residue into her own skin. It is good for the cracks in her hands, for the chilblains that plague her knuckles. It is a borrowed warmth. The room feels darker now that the white blanket is laid. The pale surface reflects the firelight, but it also emphasizes the deep shadows that crowd the corners. The bed looks like a snow-covered grave, a barrel waiting for the spring. The wind outside shifts its tone. It drops the high, keening whistle and returns to the low, sub-bass rumble. It vibrates the floorboards. The mother can feel it in the soles of her feet, a trembling of the earth itself. The house is a small wooden box vibrating in the throat of the storm. She looks at the fire. The pine cones have burned away, leaving fragile skeletons of white ash that crumble as the draft touches them. The oak embers are fading, a dull, dying red. It is time for fuel. It is time to feed the sun. She walks to the hearth. Her movements are slow, conserving energy. Every motion is calculated. She kneels on the stone hearth. The cold of the stone penetrates her dress instantly. She reaches for the fuel basket. It is nearly empty of wood, but in the corner, wrapped in burlap, are the peat briquettes. Blocks of ancient earth, dug from the bog years ago, dried until they are hard as rock. They are dark brown, fibrous, smelling of deep roots and decayed time. She takes 2 blocks of peat. They are heavy, dense, with concentrated carbon. She places them onto the bed of embers. She does not throw them, she arranges them. She builds a small architecture of fuel, leaving a gap for the air to flow. The peat does not flame immediately. It sits there, absorbing the heat, a dark presence in the fire. Then slowly a glow begins at the edges, a deep orange smolder that spreads inward. Peat burns hot and it burns long. It releases a thick, aromatic smoke that smells of the earth, a grounding scent that counters the animal smell of the raw wool. The mother stays by the fire for a moment. She holds her hands out to the smoldering peat. The heat is different from the wood. It is a radiant, penetrating heat, heavy and slow. It feels like the heat of a living body. She closes her eyes and lets the warmth seep into her palms. She imagines the bog where the peat came from, a place of water and sky, now frozen solid under the ice. She imagines the summer that grew the moss that became the peat, a summer from 1,000 years ago. She is burning the past to keep the present alive. She opens her eyes. The duty pulls her back. The warmth is a temporary respite. The cold is the permanent reality. She pushes herself up from the hearth. Her joints pop loud in the quiet room. She turns her back on the fire. Her shadow stretches out before her, reaching for the bed, reaching for the chest. The chest is still open. The mouth of the box still holds treasures. There are 4 layers left, 4 more weights to add to the scale. She walks to the chest. The journey is familiar now. It is a groove worn in the air. She knows the exact number of steps, 7 steps to the center, 5 steps to the chest. She walks with her head down, watching her boots move over the dark wood. The floorboards are frosted near the walls, a glitter of ice crystals in the grain. The cold is encroaching. The circle of warmth is shrinking. She reaches the chest. She looks down into the cavity. The white wool is gone, revealing the next layer. It is dark. It is the color of the deep ocean, a midnight blue that is almost black. It is an indigo blanket, but it is not soft wool. It is a blend of heavy linen and coarse wool woven in a tight, flat weave. It is a naval blanket, a military surplus from a war fought on frozen seas. It is stiff, canvas-like, designed to block the wind on the deck of a ship. It is a structural layer. It will add rigidity to the mound. She reaches for it. The fabric is cold and hard. It feels like touching a sail that has been frozen. She grips the edge. There is no give. It is a sheet of dark ice. She pulls. It slides against the layer beneath it with a sharp shhhhk sound, the sound of dry canvas dragging. She lifts it out. It is heavy, but not with the dead weight of the felt or the lumpy weight of the quilt. It has a balanced, disciplined weight. It holds its shape as she lifts it, hanging in a stiff rectangle. She holds it to her chest. It smells of salt and tar, a faint memory of its origins. It is a harsh blanket. It is not meant for comfort. It is meant for survival. She turns towards the bed. The white mound of the raw wool glows in the distance. She is about to extinguish that light. She is about to cover the snow with the sea. She begins the walk. The indigo blanket bangs against her shins, rigid and unyielding. She feels like she is carrying a door. She navigates the shadows. The firelight barely touches this dark fabric. It seems to absorb the photons, drinking the light. She is a shadow carrying a shadow. The wind hums its monotone song. Hoo-yum, a vibration that rattles the teeth. She reaches the bedside. She looks at the sleeper. The white wool looks soft, inviting. It looks like a bed in a cloud. The indigo blanket will change that. It will compress the white wool. It will lock the lanolin scent in. The mother prepares to lift the heavy rectangle. She has to swing it slightly to get it over the height of the mound. The bed is waist high now. It is a significant obstacle. She swings the blanket up. It opens in the air like a dark wing. It blocks the view of the sleeper entirely for a second. She lowers it. It lands flat. It does not drape. It sits on top of the white wool like a lid. The corners stick out, stiff and horizontal, defying gravity. The mother has to force them down. She leans her weight onto the blanket. It crunches softly, the linen fibers bending under pressure. She presses the center. The indigo fabric is rough under her hands. It has a texture like a file. She begins the tucking process. This is the hardest one yet. The canvas does not want to go into the gap. It is too thick, too stiff. She has to use the handle of a wooden spoon she pulls from her apron pocket. She uses the wood as a chisel, driving the stiff fabric into the crevice between the mattress and the frame. Scrape, push, scrape, push. The sound is harsh, abrasive. She works her way around the bed. It is slow, grinding work. Her breath comes in short bursts. The exertion warms her blood, a flushed heat that rises in her cheeks, but her hands remain freezing. She works the corners. She folds the stiff indigo into sharp military angles. She forces the points down, pinning them with the weight of the mattress. The bed now looks severe. It looks like a cargo crate covered in a tarp. The softness of the white wool is completely hidden. The bed is a dark blue block in the center of the room. The indigo absorbs the firelight, reflecting nothing. It is a black hole of warmth. She smooths the top. Her hands make a rasping sound on the linen. She feels the body beneath. It is distant now. The sleeper is buried under 6 layers of history: gray, brown, green, quilt, red, white, indigo. Each layer a different era, a different purpose. The mother pauses at the head of the bed. She folds the stiff indigo collar back. It resists, trying to spring back up. She creases it hard with her thumb, breaking the fibers slightly to make it stay. The collar is thick and multicolored now, a heavy ring of protection. She looks at the sleeper's face. It is the only thing visible, a pale mask of peace. The air above the face is cold, swirling with the draft. The mother gently pulls the indigo blanket up a fraction of an inch higher, shielding the throat. The sleeper does not stir. The sleeper is deep in the dream of winter. The mother stands back, her arms ache. Her fingers are locked into claws from the cold and the gripping. She flexes them slowly, painfully. She looks at the window. The frost has changed. The patterns are no longer ferns. They are geometric now, blocks and lines of ice that mirror the weave of the blankets. The room is crystallizing. The house is becoming a geode, lined with ice, with the fire as the only soft thing remaining. She listens to the silence. The wind has paused for a breath. In that gap she hears the settling of the logs in the walls, a sharp crack from the corner like a gunshot. The wood is contracting, squeezing the nails that hold it together. The house is shrinking in the cold. It is hugging them tighter. The mother looks at the ceiling. The shadows of the rafters are like ribs. She is inside the belly of a beast that is slowly freezing to death. She looks back at the chest. 3 layers remain. The bottom of the chest is visible now. The wood of the chest floor is dark, stained by centuries of storage. The remaining blankets are the heaviest. They are the final line of defense. They are the ones that are never used except in the long winter, except in the winter that has no name. She takes a step towards the fire to warm her hands again. The peat is burning well, a steady, dark red glow that emits a fierce heat. The smell of the burning earth fills the room, grounding her. She takes a deep breath of the smoke. It coats her throat with a taste of ancient soil. She is ready. She turns back to the darkness. She turns back to the chest. The next layer awaits. The 7th layer is done. The 8th is calling. She walks. The floor is an expanse of frozen time. She moves across it, a solitary figure in a room of shadows, moving between the fire and the ice, weaving a cocoon of wool and will. She reaches the chest. She looks down. The mother stands motionless before the open chest, her figure a dark silhouette against the faint, ruddy glow of the peat fire behind her. The air in the corner where the chest resides is the coldest in the room, a pocket of stillness where the temperature has dropped to a level that threatens the very structure of the wood. The oak planks of the floor are rimed with a ghostly white powder, a frost that has bloomed from the moisture of the air itself, freezing instantly upon contact with the shadows. She looks down into the depths of the chest. The indigo naval blanket is gone, now serving as the 7th shield upon the bed. What remains in the box are the heavyweights, the ancients, the blankets reserved for the nights when the sky threatens to fall. She stares at the 8th layer. It is a blanket of dense, charcoal gray wool, woven with a pattern of black geometric shapes, diamonds and zigzags that repeat in a hypnotic, endless rhythm. It is a double weave, 2 layers of fabric interlocked during the loom process to create a single, thick textile. It is not soft. It is not pliable. It looks like a slab of carved slate rather than a piece of cloth. It absorbs the gloom, the dark gray and black merging with the shadows, until the edges of the blanket are lost to the eye. It smells of old stone and cold iron, a mineral scent that speaks of the mountains from which the wool came. The mother reaches down. Her movement is slow, hindered by the stiffness of her own joints and the resistance of the heavy clothing she wears. Her hand, pale and trembling with the cold, descends into the box. She touches the surface of the 8th blanket. It is coarse, the fibers thick and tightly spun. It feels abrasive, like the surface of a rock covered in dry lichen. There is no warmth in it yet. It is a cold object, a thermal sink waiting to be filled. She grips the edge. The fabric is so thick that she cannot fold it easily in her hand. She must clamp her fingers onto it like a claw. She prepares to lift. She inhales sharply, the freezing air rushing into her lungs, stinging the tissue. She braces her legs, planting her felt boots on the frosty floorboards. She pulls. The blanket resists. It is heavy with a density that defies expectation. It drags against the wood of the chest and the layer beneath it, creating a deep, grinding sound, the friction of heavy wool on wood. Grrrrrrrrshhhhh. The sound is loud in the silent room, a vibration that seems to travel through the floor and up her legs. She hoists it up. It hangs from her arms in heavy, rigid folds. It does not drape. It breaks into angular planes, the heavy wool holding the shape of the fold. It blocks her view of her own feet. It pulls her shoulders forward. She feels the strain in her lower back, a dull ache that is becoming a permanent part of her existence. She clutches the bundle to her chest, trying to consolidate the weight. The charcoal wool scratches against her cheek, a rough, dry kiss. She turns slowly to face the room. The perspective has shifted again. The bed, now a towering mound covered in the stiff indigo canvas, looks like a fortress wall. The fire is a low, sullen red eye watching her from the hearth. The shadows have lengthened, stretching across the ceiling like dark beams, closing in on the center. The room feels smaller, compressed by the weight of the snow outside and the cold inside. The atmosphere is thick, almost gelatinous, resisting her movement. She begins the walk, step. The floorboard groans, a sound of protest from the frozen wood. Pause, she waits for the echo to die, step. Another groan, she is a pilgrim carrying a stone. The gray and black blanket absorbs the firelight, offering no reflection, no shimmer. It is a void in her arms. She navigates the landscape of the room, avoiding the sharp corners of the table, the loom that sits silent in the gloom. Her shadow moves with her, a lumbering giant on the wall that mimics her burden. She reaches the bed. The indigo blanket lies flat and hard on the mound, a dark blue plateau. The sleeper is invisible beneath the 7 layers. There is no movement to be seen, only the faint, almost imperceptible rise and fall of the mound, a geological breathing. The mother stands at the foot of the bed, the charcoal blanket heavy in her arms. She needs to catch her breath. The exertion of the carry has accelerated her heart rate, but the cold is working to slow it down. She feels the conflict in her blood, the heat of effort battling the ice of the environment. She looks at the pattern on the blanket she holds. The black diamonds seem to pulse in the dim light. They are symbols of protection, ancient runes woven into the fabric to ward off the spirits of the winter. She traces one with her eye, a sharp angle, a closed loop, a trap for the cold. She lifts the blanket higher. Her arms shake. The weight is near the limit of her strength. She swings the heavy mass forward. It does not float. It crashes. It lands on the indigo layer with a heavy, muffled thump, a sound of dead weight hitting a solid surface. The air is pushed out from beneath it in a sudden gust that stirs the dust on the floor. The blanket lies in a heap on the lower half of the bed, a chaotic pile of gray and black. The mother pauses. She needs to summon the energy to spread it. The indigo layer beneath is slippery, the glazed linen offering little purchase for the wool. She leans forward and grabs the top corners of the charcoal blanket. She pulls. It drags slowly up the slope of the bed. It is like dragging a heavy rug uphill. She walks her hands up the sides of the bed, pulling the fabric inch by inch. The black diamonds stretch and distort as the fabric moves. She covers the sleeper's feet, the shins, the knees. She pulls it up over the hips, the chest. The blanket is long. It reaches the headboard and still hangs over the foot. She begins the smoothing. This blanket is too thick to iron out with a simple sweep of the hand. She has to press it. She uses her fists, pounding the fabric gently to force it to lie flat. Thud, thud, thud. She works her way down the center, breaking the stiffness of the wool, forcing it to conform to the mound. The charcoal wool interlocks with the rough texture of the indigo canvas below. The two heavy, unforgiving fabrics grind against each other, creating a friction seal. She moves to the side of the bed. The tucking. It is a battle now. The mattress is buried under so much material that the gap between it and the bed frame is almost non-existent. The pressure of the 7 layers pushing down is immense. To insert the 8th layer requires force. The mother looks at her hands. They are red and raw, the skin dry as paper. She cannot use her fingers alone. She reaches into the pocket of her apron and retrieves the wooden spoon handle she used before. It is worn smooth, a simple tool. She positions the edge of the charcoal blanket over the gap. She places the tip of the wood against the fabric. She pushes. The wool resists. It bunches up, refusing to enter the narrow space. She leans her body weight onto the tool. She grunts with the effort. The fabric yields, slipping a fraction of an inch into the crack. She pushes again. Another fraction. It is a slow, agonizing process. Stitch by stitch, inch by inch, she drives the heavy blanket into the seal. The sound of the wood scraping against the bed frame is sharp and rhythmic. Scrape, push, scrape, push. She works her way down the length of the bed. Her breath comes in white clouds that obscure her work. She has to pause to wipe the frost from her eyelashes. The cold is crystallizing the moisture in her eyes. She blinks, clearing her vision, and continues. The side is done. It is a ragged, forced seal, but it holds. She moves to the foot of the bed. Here, the bulk is unmanageable. The layers are a thick, chaotic sandwich of wool and hair and cotton. She cannot tuck this. She must fold and pin. She takes the heavy overhang of the charcoal blanket and folds it under the mattress, lifting the heavy straw-filled sack with one hand while shoving the wool with the other. The mattress is heavy as a dead man. She strains, her muscles trembling. She manages to wedge the fabric underneath. It is not neat. It is a bulge of protection, a bumper against the draft that flows along the floor. She rounds the corner to the window side. The temperature drop is palpable. It is like stepping into a freezer. The frost on the window is now a thick, opaque armor inches deep. The glass is gone, replaced by a wall of ice. The cold radiates from it in waves. The mother shivers violently, her teeth clicking together. She works faster here, driven by the need to escape the immediate proximity of the ice. She uses the tool aggressively, jamming the blanket into the frame. Thud, scrape, thud. She does not care about the finish. She cares about the seal. She reaches the head of the bed. She folds the heavy charcoal collar back. It is stiff and thick, standing up almost vertically before she forces it down. The cross-section of the bed is a history of her labor. The gray, the brown, the green, the quilt, the red, the white, the indigo, and now the charcoal. It is a rampart, a fortification. The sleeper's face is deep within the well of fabric. The mother has to lean over to see the pale skin. The breath is still there, faint, slow, but there. She stands back. She drops the wooden tool back into her pocket. It clatters against her thigh. She looks at the bed. The charcoal blanket has transformed it. It no longer looks like a bed. It looks like a geological feature, a dark rock formation rising from the floor. The geometric patterns on the wool look like fissures in the stone. It is somber. It is heavy. It looks permanent. The wind outside rises. It is not a gust. It is a sustained pressure. The cabin groans. The main beam in the ceiling emits a long, tortured creak that sounds like a ship breaking apart. The mother looks up. The shadows in the rafters are vibrating with the sound. The house is fighting. The wood is fighting. She is fighting. She turns to the hearth. The peat briquettes she added earlier have settled into a solid mass of glowing heat. The red light is intense, localized, failing to penetrate the far corners. She walks towards it, drawn by the thermal gravity. She sits in the chair. Her legs feel hollow, light with fatigue. She extends her hands to the fire. The heat strikes her palms, stinging the frozen skin. She rubs them together, the sound of dry skin on dry skin like the rustling of parchment. She looks at the fire. The peat burns with a blue and orange flame, low and steady. It consumes itself slowly. She watches a single flake of ash rise from the center, caught in the updraft. It floats up, glowing for a second before turning gray and disappearing into the chimney. It is a metaphor for the heat. It rises and is lost. The room is a sieve. The cold is the ocean. She looks around the room. The details are fading. The corners are losing their definition, dissolving into a blurred darkness. The vintage drawing style of the world is becoming rougher, the lines heavier, the shading more aggressive. The colored pencil strokes are thick and black, obscuring the wood grain, obscuring the tools. Only the bed and the fire remain distinct, the two poles of her existence. She thinks of the sleeper. Who is the sleeper? It does not matter. It is a life. It is the core. She is the shell. Her purpose is to harden, to endure, to wrap. The sleeper's purpose is to continue, to breathe, to keep the blood moving. She wonders if the sleeper is dreaming. What dreams can penetrate 8 layers of heavy wool? Perhaps dreams of deep caves, of hibernation, of the roots of mountains. She looks at her boots. They are covered in a fine layer of dust and wool fibers. They are heavy on her feet. She wiggles her toes. They are numb. The cold has reached her extremities. She needs to move. To sit is to freeze. To sit is to invite the sleep that has no waking. She pushes herself up. The chair creaks. The room spins slightly, then settles. She turns her back to the fire. The heat lingers on the back of her dress for a moment, then vanishes. She faces the chest. The open lid is a dark rectangle. 2 layers remain. The bottom of the chest is near. The end of the task is in sight. But the final layers are the most difficult. They are the ones that require the most strength, the most will. She walks. The journey is a loop, from fire to chest, from chest to bed, from bed to fire. A triangle of survival. She walks the line. The floor is treacherous now. The frost has spread further from the walls, creeping towards the center. The wood is slippery with ice. She treads carefully. She cannot fall. To fall is to break. To break is to fail. She reaches the chest. She looks down. The charcoal blanket is gone. The 9th layer is revealed. It is not wool. It is not cotton. It is darker. It is wilder. It brings a new smell to the cold air, a scent of musk and adrenaline. It is a skin, a heavy, cured hide. The mother stares at it. It looks like a shadow trapped in the bottom of the box. It looks like a piece of the night itself, cut and tanned. She reaches out. Her hand hesitates. This layer is different. This layer was once alive in a way the wool was not. This layer remembers the heartbeat. She touches the fur. It is thick, dense, and oily. It is the coat of a bear, a winter bear. She grabs the fur. Her fingers sink into the depth of it. It is warm to the touch, or perhaps that is a trick of the mind. It feels potential. It feels latent. She prepares to lift. The hide is heavy, heavier than the felt, heavier than the charcoal wool. It is the weight of the beast. She grips it with both hands. She widens her stance. She engages her core. She pulls. The skin sticks to the wood of the chest, a suction of leather on oak. She pulls harder. With a sucking sound, it releases. She lifts it. It is massive. It unfolds in her arms, a dark, shaggy avalanche. The fur brushes against her face, tickling and imposing. It blocks the light. It blocks the air. It is a wall of fur. She holds it close. It smells of the cave. It smells of the deep sleep. She turns towards the bed. The charcoal mound waits. The 9th layer is coming. The beast is returning to the den. She takes a step. The weight pulls her down. She staggers slightly, then corrects. She walks. The bare skin is a burden of history. She carries it across the shadowed floor, a small figure wrestling with a giant shadow. The wind howls outside, a sound of recognition. The wild recognizes the wild. She approaches the bed. The charcoal blanket is geometric, ordered. The bare skin is organic, chaotic. She prepares to cover the order with the chaos. She prepares to lay the beast down. The cold watches. The shadows watch. The fire pulses. The mother breathes. The mother stands in the center of the room, a solitary figure anchored by the immense weight of the bare skin draped across her arms. The fur is a dark, heavy mass that seems to swallow the dim light of the cabin, a black hole of texture that absorbs the faint orange glow of the peat fire and returns nothing but shadow. The weight of the hide is not merely physical, it is historical. It carries the density of the winters the beast endured, the heavy, slow-beating heart of a hibernation that lasted for months in the deep, frozen earth. It smells of that earth. It smells of resin and musk, a pungent, oily scent that rolls off the fur in waves, displacing the dry, stale air of the room. It is a scent that triggers a primal memory in the brain stem, a memory of caves and firelight and the long, waiting dark. She adjusts her grip. The leather side of the pelt is against her arms, cold and smooth and stiff as parchment. The fur side presses against her chest and neck, the long, coarse guard hairs tickling her chin, threatening to make her sneeze. She suppresses the urge. To sneeze would be a violent explosion in the quiet room, a disruption of the heavy, slow rhythm she has established. She breathes through her mouth, tasting the musk, tasting the dust. Her arms are trembling. The lactic burn in her muscles is a dull, constant ache, a background noise to the sharper, more immediate sensation of the cold biting at her exposed wrists. She begins the walk to the bed. It is a slow, lumbering progression. The bare skin is so large that its edges drag on the floorboards, sweeping the frost into small, white ridges. Swish, scrape, swish. The sound is heavy, the sound of a large body moving through dry undergrowth. She has to widen her stance to maintain her balance, her felt boots planting heavily on the wood with each step. The room feels tilted, the perspective warped by the fatigue and the shadows. The bed seems miles away, a dark island across a frozen sea. The fire behind her casts her shadow forward, a monstrous, shapeless form that engulfs the bed before she even reaches it. She focuses on her breathing. In, out. The air is so cold it feels thick, like breathing syrup. It chills her throat, her lungs, cooling her core from the inside out. She can feel the heat of her own body retreating, pulling back from her skin, centering around her heart and the heavy burden she carries. She is a vessel of warmth transporting a shield of warmth. She reaches the side of the bed. The mound is high now, waist high, a stratified geological formation of wool and cotton and canvas. The charcoal geometric blanket, the 8th layer, lies on top, its black diamonds staring up like vigilant eyes. It looks orderly. It looks manufactured. The bare skin will change that. She prepares to heave the pelt. This requires a different technique than the blankets. The blankets could be floated to some extent. The bare skin must be thrown. It is dead weight. She bends her knees, the joints cracking with the sound of dry twigs breaking. She gathers the bulk of the hide in her arms, bunching the stiff leather. She leans back slightly, using the weight of her upper body as a counterweight. Then, with a low, guttural exhalation of effort, she swings her arms forward and up. The skin leaves her hands. It flies through the air for a fraction of a second, a dark, flying shape before crashing down onto the bed. The impact is heavy, thud. It is a sound of finality, a sound of flesh and fur meeting wool. The bed shudders under the weight. The air is driven out from the layers beneath, a puff of cold wind that hits the mother's face. The skin does not land flat. It lands in a chaotic heap, a mountain range of fur with the limbs of the hide splayed out in awkward directions. One of the heavy paws hangs over the side, swinging slowly like a pendulum before coming to rest. The mother stands panting. Her breath clouds the air, a thick fog that hangs around her head. She waits for her heart to slow down. The exertion has sent a flush of heat through her chest, but it is fleeting, quickly consumed by the voracious cold of the room. She looks at the bed. The geometric order of the charcoal blanket is gone, buried under the primal chaos of the fur. The bed now looks like a sleeping beast. It looks like the bear has returned to claim the sleeper. She steps forward to arrange the hide. She reaches out and grabs the fur. It is cold, the guard hair stiff and wiry. Underneath, she can feel the dense, soft undercoat, the true insulation. She pulls the skin towards the head of the bed. It is heavy, resisting her pull with the friction of the leather on the wool. She has to lean her entire body weight into the task, dragging the beast inch by inch. The leather creaks, a sound like old shoes walking on snow. She pulls the head of the pelt up, positioning it so that the thick neck fur covers the sleeper's chest. She is careful not to cover the face. The sleeper's breath must remain unobstructed, a thin lifeline to the open air. She moves to the sides. The skin is irregular. It does not have straight edges. It has flanks and legs. She has to tuck the flanks in. She pushes the stiff leather down, molding it over the mound of the previous layers. The leather resists, trying to spring back to its cured shape. She uses her fists to hammer it down. Thump, thump. She beats the bare skin into submission. She forces it to conform to the shape of the bed. The fur creates a seal that is different from the wool. The wool breathes. The skin blocks. The skin is a barrier of windproofing, a layer of skin to replace the thin skin of the sleeper. She deals with the legs of the hide. They are heavy flaps of fur that hang down the sides of the bed. She cannot tuck them in the traditional way. They are too thick. Instead, she wraps them under the mattress, lifting the heavy straw-filled sack with one hand and shoving the fur leg underneath with the other. It is a wrestling match. She is wrestling the bear in the dark. The mattress is incredibly heavy now, weighted down by 9 layers of material. She strains, her back screaming in protest. She manages to wedge the front leg of the hide under the frame. She moves to the back leg. She repeats the struggle. Lift, shove, drop. She circles the bed. The floor is treacherous with frost. She slips slightly, her boot skidding on a patch of ice. She catches herself on the bedpost. The wood of the post is frozen, burning her palm with the intensity of the cold. She steadies herself. She moves to the other side, the window side, the ice wall. The cold here is physical, a pressure wave radiating from the frosted glass. She works quickly, her fingers numb and clumsy. She pushes the other flank of the skin down. She tucks the remaining legs. She smooths the fur. The bed is transformed. It is vast. It is dark. In the vintage charcoal aesthetic of the room, the bed is a mass of heavy, scribbled black lines, a dense void in the center of the gray paper. The individual hairs of the fur catch the faint light from the fire, creating tiny, sharp highlights that look like scratches in the drawing. The texture is palpable. You can feel the roughness of the coat just by looking at it. It is a texture of the wild brought indoors. The mother moves to the head of the bed. She looks down at the sleeper. The face is a small, pale oval surrounded by a crater of fur. The bare skin rises high around the head, creating a deep tunnel. The sleeper is at the bottom of a well of warmth. The mother reaches out and gently brushes a stray lock of hair from the sleeper's forehead. Her skin is rough, callous against smooth flesh. The sleeper does not move. The sleep is deep. The hibernation is total. She stands back and surveys her work. The bare skin covers everything. The red, the white, the indigo, the charcoal, all are hidden beneath the ancient coat. The bed looks primitive now. It looks like a bed from the dawn of time, before weaving, before spinning. It looks like a survival instinct made manifest. The wind outside rises to a howl. It is a long, mournful sound, the voice of a wolf pack made of air. It circles the house, testing the corners, searching for a way in. The cabin creaks in response, the timbers groaning under the assault. The mother looks up at the ceiling. The shadows are shaking. The whole house is vibrating with the wind. It feels fragile. It feels like a small wooden boat in a storm of ice. But the bed is solid. The bed is an anchor. She turns back to the hearth. The peat fire has burned down to a low, intense bed of coals. The red light is darker now, more blood-colored than orange. It does not reach far into the room. The corners are lost in absolute blackness. The mother walks towards the fire. She needs the heat. She needs to recharge her own thermal battery. She walks slowly, her feet heavy. The floor is getting colder. She can feel the chill seeping through the soles of her boots. The frost on the floor is growing, creeping inward like a white fungus. She reaches the chair and collapses into it. The wood groans. She leans forward, extending her hands to the embers. Her hands are shaking uncontrollably now. The fine motor control is gone. She is just a system of shivering muscles. She stares into the heart of the fire. The peat creates shapes as it burns, tiny glowing landscapes of canyons and mountains. She loses herself in the topography of the fire. She imagines walking in that landscape, where the ground is warm and the air is hot. She stays there for a long time. Time is meaningless in the room. There is no clock. There is only the fire and the ice. The rhythm of the room is the rhythm of the dying embers. Pulse, fade, pulse, fade. She listens to the wind. It sounds like voices now. Muffled, distant voices calling her name. She knows it is a trick of the auditory nerve, a symptom of the fatigue and the sensory deprivation. She ignores them. She focuses on the heat on her palms. She rubs her face. Her skin feels strange, numb, and tingling at the same time. She touches her nose. It is cold as ice. She realizes she is cooling down too fast. The exertion kept her warm, but the stillness is dangerous. She must move. She must finish the task. But is the task finished? The chest. She remembers the chest. She turns her head slowly. The movement is stiff, her neck muscles tight. She looks at the chest in the corner. It is a dark rectangle in the shadows. The lid is open. Is it empty? She tries to remember. The bare skin was the ninth layer. Was there another? The memory is foggy, obscured by the cold. She feels a pull, a sense of unfinished business. There is something else. There is always something else. She forces herself to stand. It is a battle of will. Her legs feel like lead. Her body wants to stay in the chair, to curl up and sleep. But she knows that sleep is death. Not for the sleeper in the bed, they are safe, wrapped in the warmth of the world, but for her. She is the guardian, she cannot sleep. She pushes herself up. She stumbles slightly, catching her balance. She takes a deep breath of the freezing air. It wakes her up, a slap of cold to the brain. She begins the walk to the chest. It feels longer this time. The room seems to have stretched. The floorboards are covered in a thin film of rime. Her boots crunch softly. Crunch, crunch. The sound is loud and crisp. She looks at her breath. It is a constant stream of fog now, a locomotive engine of vapor. She wraps her arms around herself, hugging her ribs. The wool of her dress feels thin. The cold is penetrating the layers, finding the skin, finding the bone. She reaches the chest. She looks down into the darkness. The bare skin is gone. The bottom of the chest should be visible, but it is not. There is something there. Lying on the bottom of the wood, almost invisible in the gloom, is a final object. It is not a blanket in the traditional sense. It does not look like wool or fur. It looks different. It reflects no light. It absorbs the shadows. The mother leans closer. She squints her eyes, trying to make out the texture. It looks fluid, yet solid. It looks like a piece of the night sky cut out and folded. It is the 10th layer, the final layer, the layer that seals the pact. She feels a sense of dread and a sense of relief. The end is near. The work is almost done. She reaches her hand down. The air inside the chest is colder than the room. It is a well of absolute zero. Her fingers brush against the object. It feels impossibly smooth. It feels like touching still water. It feels like touching silence. She shivers. This is not a material of the earth. This is a material of the void. She grips it. It has no weight, and yet it has infinite weight. It is a paradox in her hand. She prepares to lift it. She knows this will be the hardest carry of all. This is the blanket that wraps not just the body, but the soul. This is the blanket that hides the sleeper from the eyes of the storm. She stands up straight, holding the object. It unfolds in the darkness, a cascade of shadow. It makes no sound. It has no smell. It is simply an absence of light. She turns towards the bed. The bare skin waits. The mound waits. The mother begins the final approach. The wind stops. The house falls silent. The fire holds its breath. The only sound is the beating of her own heart, slow and heavy, a drum in the deep. She walks. The darkness flows from her hands, trailing on the floor like a royal train of midnight. She is the queen of the winter, and she is bringing the final gift. She looks at the bed. It looms before her, a mountain to be capped. She moves towards it, step by silent step, moving through the vintage drawing of the room, a figure of charcoal moving through a world of slate and ice. The object in the mother's hands, this final layer retrieved from the deepest sediment of the wooden chest, possesses a quality that defies the simple categorization of textile. It is a woven thing, certainly, born of a loom and a shuttle, but it feels less like a fabric and more like a captured piece of the deep, moonless night that presses against the cabin walls. It is the 10th layer. It is the midnight weave. It is an expanse of wool so densely spun, so heavily dyed in vats of iron and oak gall and indigo, that it has lost all ability to reflect the world around it. In the vintage, charcoal sketch reality of the room, this blanket is a void, a patch of pure negative space that she holds against her chest. It drinks the faint, ruddy light of the peat fire and offers nothing in return. It is a heavy, fluid absence. The mother stands near the chest, the open lid gaping like a dark jaw behind her. She adjusts her grip on the material. It is cool to the touch, with a slickness that is unlike the greasy lanolin of the white wool or the coarse scratch of the goat hair. This wool has been burnished, pressed between heavy rollers of cold stone until the fibers were crushed flat, creating a surface that feels like polished slate or black ice. It slips through her fingers, fluid and heavy, behaving more like a viscous liquid than a solid cloth. It creates no friction. It creates no sound. It is the silence of the winter made tangible. She turns her body towards the bed. The movement is slow, a rotation of a heavy axis. The weight of the 10th layer is deceptive. It pulls at her arms not with a downward drag, but with a strange, encompassing gravity, as if it is trying to anchor her to the center of the earth. She takes a breath. The air in this corner of the room is now so cold that it feels sharp in her throat, a jagged intake of frost that chills the blood in her veins before it can reach her heart. She exhales, and the vapor of her breath is instantly snatched away by the hungry, dry air, disappearing before it can even form a cloud. She begins the walk. The distance to the bed is short in meters but vast in effort. The floorboards are now treacherous, coated in a fine, glittering grid of ice crystals that have bloomed from the wood grain. Her felt boots find purchase only through the weight of her burden. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound of her steps is the only noise in the room, a rhythmic breaking of the frost that echoes dully off the frozen timber walls. She keeps her eyes fixed on the bed. The mound of the sleeper is a chaotic, savage shape under the bare skin. The fur rises and falls in jagged peaks, the limbs of the hide sprawling in a wild, organic disarray. It looks like a beast sleeping in the dark. It looks untamed. The 10th layer is the tamer. The 10th layer is the silencer. She moves through the center of the room. The fire in the hearth has burned down to a low, sullen pulse of deep red. The peat briquettes are consumed from the inside, glowing with a fierce, contained heat that struggles to push past the iron grate. The light is weak. It washes over the floor in faint, bloody ripples, catching the edges of the furniture, the leg of a stool, the rim of the spinning wheel, and turning them into skeletal outlines in the gloom. The mother passes through the pool of faint heat. It touches her cheek for a fleeting second, a ghost of a caress, before she steps back into the blue-gray shadow of the bed's dominance. She arrives at the foot of the bed. She pauses. The mound is high, reaching up to her lower ribs. It is a monument of 9 stratifications. The bare skin, the 9th layer, is dominant, its dark fur bristling with a static energy, catching the microscopic dust motes in the air. The mother looks at the chaos of the fur. It is warm, yes, but it is porous. The wind can rustle the hairs. The draft can navigate the forest of the pelt. To seal the heat, the chaos must be covered. The surface must be made smooth. The wind must be given no purchase. She prepares to cast the midnight weave. She gathers the fluid, heavy blackness in her arms, bunching it up. It slides against itself with a whisper, a sound like sand shifting in a glass. She creates a heavy fold of material. She leans back, engaging the exhausted muscles of her spine, the vertebrae clicking softly in the silence. She swings the blanket forward. It leaves her hands. It does not flap. It does not flutter. It flows. It moves through the air like a sheet of dark oil, expanding effortlessly to its full width. It hangs suspended for a heartbeat, a rectangular eclipse that blocks the view of the bear, the sleeper, and the far wall. Then it descends. It lands on the bear skin with a sound that is not a thud, but a hush. It is a sound of suppression. It is the sound of a heavy door closing on a noisy room. The blanket settles. It is heavy enough to crush the guard hairs of the bare skin instantly. The jagged peaks of the fur are flattened. The wild silhouette of the beast is smoothed out, softened, erased. The midnight weave drapes over the mound, conforming to the shape but simplifying it. Where there was the chaos of the animal, now there is only the smooth, undulating curve of the black wool. It looks like a hill in the deep night. It looks like a dark dune. The mother stands and watches the settling. The fabric moves on its own for a moment, sliding slowly down the slopes of the mound, seeking the lowest point. It is heavy, liquid wool. It pools at the bottom, near the floor, draping over the edges of the bed in long, elegant folds that look like carved marble. The bed is now completely black. It reflects no light. The red glow of the fire strikes the surface and vanishes. The room feels instantly darker, as if the bed has become a sinkhole for the remaining lumens. She steps forward to begin the arrangement. She reaches out and touches the surface of the 10th layer. It is shockingly cold. It has been sitting in the bottom of the chest in the coldest air for years. It carries the temperature of the void, but it is an insulator. It will warm up on the inside, trapping the heat of the 9 layers below while remaining freezing to the touch on the outside. This is its function: to be as cold as the room, so the room does not try to steal from it. She runs her hand down the center of the bed. The sensation is frictionless. The wool is so tightly woven and pressed that it feels like glass. She pushes the air out. She can feel the crunch of the bare fur beneath the black layer, the hide adjusting to the new pressure. She smooths the fabric over the sleeper's legs. The shape of the limbs is barely visible now. The sleeper is deep, deep down. The sleeper is at the core of the earth. She moves to the side of the bed. The draping is magnificent and severe. The midnight weave hangs straight down, covering the chaotic sandwich of the previous layers. The gray, the brown, the green, the quilt, the red, the white, the indigo, the charcoal, the bare, all are hidden behind the final curtain of black. The mother kneels on the frosty floor. Her knees scream with the sharp pain of the impact, but she does not wince. Her face is a mask of duty. She takes the hem of the black blanket. It is finished with a heavy, corded edge. She pulls it down. It reaches the floor. It pools on the wood, creating a skirt of darkness that seals the space under the bed. She crawls along the side. She does not tuck this layer. This layer is too heavy to tuck. It is a shroud. It is meant to hang. It is meant to create a tent of still air around the entire structure. She arranges the folds so that they lie flat against the frame, overlapping at the corners to ensure no draft can sneak through. She is building a sarcophagus of warmth. She moves with a slow, deliberate cadence. Crawl, adjust, smooth, crawl, adjust, smooth. She reaches the foot of the bed. The corners of the bare skin beneath are bulky, creating rounded protrusions. The midnight weave flows over them, turning them into soft, black boulders. She pulls the fabric taut, eliminating wrinkles. Wrinkles are surface area. Surface area is heat loss. She wants a perfect, smooth dome. She works the fabric with her numb hands, molding it like clay. The black wool accepts the shape, heavy and compliant. She moves to the window side. The cold here is violent. It assaults her face, her neck, the exposed skin of her wrists. The frost on the window is glowing with a faint blue luminescence, the light of the snow-covered world outside trying to push through. The mother ignores it. She is focused on the black wall she is building. She pulls the 10th layer down over the side. It covers the gap where the wind usually enters. It hangs like a lead curtain. She presses the hem against the floorboards, sealing the bottom edge with the weight of the wool itself. She reaches the head of the bed. This is the delicate part. The sleeper must breathe. The mother stands up, her joints popping. She looks down at the head of the bed. The bare skin had created a tunnel. The midnight weave covers that tunnel. She carefully folds the top edge of the black blanket back. It is thick, stiff, board-like wool. It holds the crease. She creates a cowl, a hood that arches over the sleeper's head without touching the face. She looks into the dark opening. Deep inside, she can see the pale blur of the sleeper's face, framed by the bare fur, which is now framed by the black wool. It is like looking down a long, dark telescope at a distant moon. The breath of the sleeper rises from the tunnel, a tiny, rhythmic wisp of vapor that condenses instantly on the cold black wool. Ha! Ha! The sound is magnified by the funnel of fabric. It is the only sound of life remaining. The mother adjusts the cowl. She pulls the sides in, narrowing the aperture. The opening must be small, just large enough for air, small enough to keep the cold at bay. She sculpts the black wool. It stays where she puts it. It is a material of absolute obedience. She ensures the collar covers the sleeper's shoulders completely, overlapping with the bare skin, locking the warmth in. The sleeper is now encased. The sleeper is a pearl inside a black oyster. She steps back. She walks backwards towards the hearth, her eyes never leaving the bed. The structure has transformed completely. It is no longer a piece of furniture. It is a monolith. It is a black, geometric shape rising from the floor, absorbing the shadows, defining the space by its darkness. It looks ancient. It looks like a burial mound from a time before history. It dominates the room, a silent, heavy presence that commands respect. The mother reaches the hearthstone. She stops. She feels the heat of the dying fire on her calves, but she does not turn around. She watches the bed. She watches the black surface. Does it move? Is the breath strong enough to lift the 10 layers? She squints in the gloom. The vintage drawing of the room is now dominated by deep, heavy blacks and dark blues. The lines are blurred. The edges are soft. She waits. There, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the highlight on the black wool. A slow hydraulic rise, a slow hydraulic fall. The chest is moving. The sleeper lives. The weight has not crushed them. The weight has secured them. The mother lets out a breath she didn't know she was holding. It rushes out of her, a long sigh of fatigue and relief. The 10 layers are laid. The wrapping is complete. But the duty is not over. The wrapping is only the preparation. Now begins the vigil. Now begins the holding action. The cold is not defeated. It is only parried. It will continue to press. It will continue to search. The mother must patrol the perimeter. She must maintain the seal. She must feed the fire. She must become the stone that anchors the house. She turns to the fire. It is time to assess the fuel. It is time to assess the night. The peat is a glowing bed of lava crumbling into white ash at the edges. The heat is steady but fading. She needs to bank it. She needs to prepare it for the long hours of the deep night, the hours between the wolf and the dawn. She looks at the basket. There are a few more briquettes, a few more knots of pine. It will have to be enough. She sits in the chair. The wood screams. She is so tired. The weight of the 10 blankets is now in her own limbs. Her arms feel stretched. Her back feels compressed. She looks at her hands. They are stained with soot, with lanolin, with dust, with the dark dye of the final blanket. They are the hands of a maker, the hands of a protector. She rubs them together. The friction is slow. The heat is minimal. The wind outside changes. It stops the howling. It stops the humming. It drops into a sudden, terrified silence. The world outside has gone dead quiet. This is the true cold. This is the cold that stops the wind. The temperature is dropping vertically. The air in the room crystallizes. The mother can see the frost growing on the floor, moving visibly now, a white tide creeping towards the black island of the bed. She watches the frost. It is beautiful and deadly. It draws intricate ferns and feathers on the wood. It sparkles in the dying firelight. It wants the bed. It wants to climb the black wool and cover the sleeper in white. The mother stiffens. She cannot let it reach the bed. She must generate heat. She must keep the air moving. She stands up. It is an act of sheer will. She forces her body to obey. She walks towards the bed. She walks around it, a slow orbit. She inspects the seal. She checks the corners where the midnight weave touches the floor. Is there a gap? She kneels. She runs her hand along the hem. She feels a tiny draft, a needle of cold air entering near the foot. The floorboard there is warped. She acts. She gathers the heavy skirt of the black blanket. She folds it over itself, creating a thicker barrier. She presses it down hard against the wood. She holds it there, letting the heat of her hand soften the wool slightly, molding it to the irregular floor. She waits. She feels for the draft. It is gone. The seal is restored. She continues her patrol. She moves to the window side. The cold is immense. The frost is thick on the floor here, crunching loudly under her boots. She checks the drape of the blanket. It is solid. It hangs like a shield. She touches the surface of the wool. It is freezing. It has equalized with the room. Good. That means the heat is inside. She rounds the head of the bed. She checks the tunnel. The breath is still rising. Haya. It is the only clock she has. She listens to it. It is slower now, deep. Hibernation pace. The sleeper has adjusted to the weight. The sleeper has descended into the dark, warm place. The mother completes the circle. She returns to the hearth. She takes the poker. She disturbs the peat. She exposes the red heart of the fire. She adds one small knot of pine. It smokes, then catches. A small yellow flame dances up, a tiny beacon in the vast, crushing dark. The light flickers, sending shadows leaping up the walls. The black bed remains a void, absorbing the movement, remaining still. She sits. She wraps her own arms around her body. She has no blankets. The blankets are for the sleeper. She has her wool dress, her apron, her shawl. It must be enough. She is the watchman. She is the lighthouse keeper. She stares at the bed. The black shape is etched into her retinas. It is the most important thing in the world. It is the sum of her life's work. The silence of the room is heavy. It presses against her eardrums. It is a physical pressure like deep water. The mother closes her eyes for a second just to rest them from the gloom. In the darkness of her mind, she sees the layers. She sees the gray, the brown, the green. She sees the quilt, the red, the white. She sees the indigo, the charcoal, the bare, and over them all the midnight weave, a perfect, heavy strata. She opens her eyes. The room is the same. The cold is the same. The bed is the same. She breathes out a long, white cloud. She watches it drift towards the fire and vanish. She settles in. The night is long. The wrapping is done. The waiting begins. The silence that fills the cabin now is not merely an absence of sound. It is a physical weight, a heavy, fluid medium that has poured into the room to replace the air. The wind, which had spent the earlier hours of the night tearing at the shingles and buffeting the logs, has retreated into the upper atmosphere, leaving the earth below in a vacuum of absolute stillness. In this vacuum, the cold intensifies. It ceases to be a weather event and becomes a geological condition, a hardening of the world into crystal and stone. The mother sits in her chair by the dying hearth, a small, gray figure etched against the encroaching dark. She is the only point of consciousness in a universe that has gone to sleep. Her eyes are fixed on the bed. It rises from the center of the room like a dark island, a monolithic structure wrapped in the final, light-absorbing layer of the midnight weave. It no longer resembles a piece of furniture made by human hands. It has lost its sharp edges, its wooden frame hidden beneath the draping skirts of the heavy wool. It looks like a natural formation, a smooth, black dune of obsidian sand that has drifted into the cabin and settled there, permanent and immovable. The firelight, weak and pulsing from the bed of peat, strikes the side of this black mound and dies, swallowed by the density of the fabric. There is no reflection. There is only the deep, velvety abyss of the wool. The mother watches the perimeter of the bed. She is looking for movement. She is looking for the flutter of a hem, the lifting of a corner, the sign that a draft has found a way in. But the black wool hangs motionless. It is heavy enough to resist the subtle currents of cold air that snake along the floorboards. It is a seal of lead. The sleeper inside is entombed in warmth, separated from the freezing room by 10 stratifications of history and labor. The mother imagines the temperature gradient. On the outside, the black wool is as cold as the frost on the window. An inch deeper in the bare fur, it is cool. Deeper still in the charcoal and indigo layers, it is neutral. And down in the core, past the red felt and the green tartan, past the brown hair and the gray wool, it is summer. It is a tropical pocket of air, humid and rich, sustaining the slow hibernation rhythm of the heart. She shifts her gaze to the floor. The frost is moving. It is a slow, silent invasion. The white line of rime that began at the walls has crept inward, consuming the wooden planks inch by inch. It looks like a tide of white chalk dust, dry and sparkling, advancing towards the hearth. The floorboards near the door are completely covered, the grain of the wood lost beneath a glittering carapace of ice. The mother watches the frost line. It is now only a few feet from her boots. It is a visual clock, measuring the time remaining until the fire fails completely. She knows she must move. The fire needs tending. The peat briquettes she added earlier have transformed into blocks of glowing ember, their structure crumbling into white ash. They are releasing their final reserves of heat. To let them die is to let the frost cross the final boundary. To let them die is to let the black bed freeze. She pushes her hands down on the arms of the chair. The wood is cold and polished, sucking the heat from her palms. She engages her legs. The muscles are stiff, solidified by the lack of movement. She stands. The action is accompanied by the cracking of her knees, a sound like dry branches snapping in a winter wood. She pauses, steadying herself against the vertigo that comes with the cold. The room tilts slightly, the shadows elongating and warping, before settling back into the rigid perspective of the night. She walks to the fuel basket. Her steps are heavy, her felt boots meeting the floor with a dull, flat sound. Thud, thud. She reaches the basket. It is a woven willow container, old and brittle. Inside, the supply is dwindling. There are 3 large briquettes of peat left and a handful of pine knots. This is the fuel for the deep watch. This is the fuel that must last until the gray light of dawn begins to smudge the window. She reaches down. Her fingers, stiff and clumsy, grasp 2 of the peat blocks. They are rough, fibrous bricks of ancient earth, smelling of the bog and the deep roots of time. She carries them to the hearth. She kneels. The stone of the hearth is the only warm place left in the room, retaining the memory of the fire. She feels the faint radiation on her shins through the heavy wool of her stockings. She uses the iron poker to open the bed of coals. The ash flies up, a gray cloud of microscopic flakes that drift in the draft. She places the fresh peat into the heart of the glow. She arranges them carefully, building a small arch to allow the air to flow beneath. Fire is a living thing. It needs to breathe just as the sleeper needs to breathe. She places a single pine knot in the center of the arch to act as a starter. She waits, she watches. The pine knot begins to smoke. A thin gray ribbon curls up, twisting like a snake, disappearing into the black throat of the chimney. Then a spark. A tiny blue flame licks the wood. It grows, turning yellow, then orange. It catches the rough fibers of the peat. The new fuel begins to burn. The light in the room shifts, brightening slightly, pushing the shadows back towards the corners. The black bed remains dark, but the frost on the floor glitters with a renewed, diamond-hard brilliance. The mother stays kneeling for a moment. She holds her hands out to the new flame. She is close enough to feel the sting of the heat. It is a sharp, painful sensation as the blood begins to flow back into her frozen fingertips. She looks at her hands. The skin is translucent, papery, etched with the dirt of the coal and the grease of the wool. They are the hands of a ghost. She rubs them together, a slow, rasping friction. She washes them in the heat. She stands up. The effort is greater than before. Gravity seems to be increasing as the night deepens. She turns away from the fire. Her shadow stretches out before her, reaching the black bed, climbing up the side of the wool mountain. She walks towards the window. She needs to inspect the enemy. She crosses the room. The air gets colder with every step. By the time she reaches the wall, she is walking in a freezer. The window is a slab of white. The frost has built up on the inside of the glass to a thickness of an inch. It is not clear ice. It is opaque, packed snow ice formed from the moisture of the room freezing instantly. There is no view of the outside. The world beyond the glass is gone. There is only the white wall. She places her hand near the ice, not touching it. She can feel the cold radiating from it, a physical push against her palm. It is a wall of negative energy. She leans closer. She listens. Is there wind? Is there snow? There is nothing. Just the ringing silence of the absolute freeze. The silence is louder than the storm. It rings in her ears, a high-pitched frequency that sounds like a wire pulled tight to the breaking point. She turns her back on the window. She looks at the room from this vantage point. It looks like a drawing done in heavy charcoal on blue-gray paper. The lines are thick and smudged. The corners are deep pools of black ink. The fire is a smudge of sanguine crayon in the distance. And in the center, the bed, the great black shape. It dominates the perspective. It looks like a sarcophagus, a tomb, a bunker. It looks impenetrable. She begins her patrol. She walks along the wall, checking the chinking between the logs. She runs her hand over the rough timber. She feels for drafts. She finds a small current of cold air near the loom, a tiny stream entering through a crack in the dried mud. She stops. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out a strip of rag, a leftover scrap of wool. She uses her fingernail to push the rag into the crack. She works it in deep, sealing the breach. The draft stops. The room is secure again. She moves to the bed. She must check the sleeper. She approaches the head of the black mound. The midnight weave forms a stiff, dark hood over the opening. The mother leans over. She peers into the tunnel of fabric. It is dark inside, a deep, cylindrical shadow. She cannot see the face. She has to rely on sound. She holds her breath. She listens. Hey-ya. The sound is there. It is slow, impossibly slow. A long, shallow exhalation that seems to take a minute to complete. Then a pause, a long, terrifying pause where the world seems to stop. Then the inhalation, hoo-wah, a slow drag of air being pulled down through the tunnel, past the black wool, past the bare fur, down to the lungs. The rhythm is stable. It is the rhythm of the deep winter sleep. The mother nods slowly in the darkness. The system is working. The layers are holding. The heat generated by the body is being trapped, recycled, maintained. The sleeper is their own furnace, fueled by the sleep itself. She straightens up. Her back aches with a sharp, biting pain. She places a hand on the black wool of the hood to steady herself. The fabric is freezing. It feels like touching a metal plate left out in the snow. It shocks her skin. It is a reminder of how thin the line is. On one side of the wool, the void. On the other side, the life. She is on the side of the void. She resumes her orbit. She walks down the side of the bed. She checks the skirt of the midnight weave. It is pooled on the floor, heavy and still. The frost has reached the edge of the blanket. A fine dusting of white powder is beginning to accumulate on the black wool, like sugar on a dark cake. The cold is trying to climb the bed. The mother bends down. She brushes the frost away with her hand. The crystals are dry and sharp. They scatter across the floor. She adjusts the hem of the blanket, pulling it out slightly to create a wider buffer zone. She pats it down. The wool is stiff, frozen into its shape. It feels like molding clay. She reaches the foot of the bed. She stands there for a moment, looking at the fire across the room. The distance feels immense. The floor is a vast, frozen plain she must cross again and again. She is the sentry walking the battlements. She is the keeper of the flame. She thinks about the layers. She visualizes them in her mind, a cross-section of the mound, the bottom sheet of linen, the sleeper, the gray wool part 1, the brown goat hair part 2, the green tartan part 3, the patchwork quilt part 4, the red felt part 5, the white raw wool part 6, the indigo canvas part 7, the charcoal geometric part 8, the bear skin part 9, the midnight weave part 10. It is a fortress. It is a heavy, crushing weight. But it is necessary. The weight is the only thing keeping the soul inside the body. She starts to walk back to the chair. Her movement is automatic. Her body has learned the path, stepping over the warped boards, avoiding the table leg. She moves through the shadows like a shadow herself. Her dress rustles softly, a sound of dry fabric that merges with the cracking of the fire. She reaches the chair and sits. The relief is instantaneous but fleeting. The cold of the wood seeps into her bones. She wraps her shawl tighter around her shoulders. It is a thin, gray thing, threadbare and old. It offers little protection. She shivers. It is a deep, shuddering vibration that starts in her spine and rattles her teeth. She clamps her jaw shut. She will not make a sound. She stares at the fire. The pine knot has burned down and the peat is now glowing with a steady, intense heat. The smoke rises in a straight line, a gray pillar that supports the chimney. The mother watches the smoke. It is hypnotic. It twists and curls, forming shapes that look like faces, like trees, like waves. It is the only thing in the room that is fluid, the only thing that is free to change. Her eyelids feel heavy. They droop, shutting out the firelight for a second. In that second of darkness, she sees the snow. She sees the fields of white stretching out to the horizon, endless and cold. She sees the buried fences, the frozen streams, the trees turned into statues of ice. She snaps her eyes open. She cannot sleep. The vigil is not over. The night is still at its nadir. She looks at the frost on the floor again. Has it moved? It seems closer. It is creeping towards the chair. It is hunting her. She pulls her feet back, tucking them under the hem of her dress. She rubs her knees. She tries to generate some friction, some heat. The house settles again. A loud bang from the roof, as if a heavy stone has been dropped on the shingles. The timber frame shudders. Dust falls from the rafters, drifting down into the firelight like gray snow. The mother does not flinch. She knows the sounds of the house. This is the sound of the wood shrinking, the fibers contracting in the extreme cold. The house is hugging itself. It is trying to become smaller, denser, harder. She looks up at the ceiling. The beams are dark stripes against the shadowed planks. They are old trees, oak and pine, felled by her ancestors. They have held this roof up for 100 winters. They will hold it up for one more. She trusts the wood. She trusts the wool. She trusts the fire. These are the old gods of the house. She looks back at the bed. The black shape is unchanged. It is a constant. It absorbs her anxiety. It absorbs her fear. As long as the black wool is still, the sleeper is safe. As long as the sleeper is safe, her purpose exists. She begins to hum. It is not a song. It is a single low note, a vibration in her throat that matches the hum of the draft in the chimney. M. It is a sound to fill the silence. It is a sound to verify that she is still alive, still vocal, still present. The sound resonates in her chest, a tiny internal warmth. She stops. The silence rushes back in, louder than before. She listens. Was that a scratch, a sound at the door? She turns her head slowly. The heavy wooden door is barred, the iron latch frozen shut. There is nothing there, just the wood and the iron and the cold. It was the wind, perhaps, returning to test the lock, or perhaps the frost itself, scratching at the wood with crystal claws. She turns back to the fire. She needs to move the logs. She picks up the poker. The iron handle is cold. She pushes the peat blocks closer together, consolidating the heat. The embers glow brighter, a fierce, angry red. She stares into the red. It is a tunnel of light. She loses herself in it. She lets her mind drift, floating on the heat waves. She thinks of the spring. It is a distant, abstract concept, a word from a storybook. She cannot remember what green grass looks like. She cannot remember the sound of running water. There is only the white and the black and the gray. There is only the solid state of water. She blinks. Her eyes are dry and gritty. She looks at her hands. The soot from the poker has stained her fingers black. She looks like she has been touching the night itself. She wipes her hands on her apron. The stain remains. It is part of her now. She is part of the charcoal drawing. She is becoming one with the room. She takes a deep breath. The air is stale and cold. She prepares to stand again. The cycle must continue. The fire, the window, the bed, the draft, the orbit of the moon around the earth, the orbit of the mother around the sleeper. She places her hands on the arms of the chair. She pushes. She rises. She stands in the center of the room, a small, weary figure. She looks at the black bed. It is waiting. The cold is waiting. She takes a step. The night has entered its deepest phase, a stretch of time where the concept of hours dissolves into a singular, elongated span of endurance. The cabin is no longer a structure of wood and stone. It has become a capsule of suspended animation, floating in a void of absolute zero. The air inside has thickened, acquiring a density that resists movement, a gelatinous quality of cold that presses against the eardrums and slows the pulse. In the dim, vintage aesthetic of the room, the colors have been stripped away. The warm browns of the timber have faded into a dull, bruised purple. The orange of the fire has deepened to a somber, blood-red crimson. The rest of the world is rendered in shades of heavy charcoal, slate gray, and the blinding, chalky white of the encroaching frost. The mother moves through this monochromatic landscape like a figure drawn with a heavy hand, her outline blurred by the shadows that cling to her wool dress. She is in the middle of a patrol, a slow, circular walk that she has performed countless times since the sun vanished. Her path is a worn groove in the silence. She walks from the hearth to the door, from the door to the window, from the window to the bed, and back to the hearth. It is a geometry of survival, a triangle of vigilance inscribed on the frozen floorboards. She stops near the loom in the corner. The loom is a skeleton of wood, silent and still. Its vertical beams cast long, skeletal shadows up the wall, looking like the bars of a cage. The mother rests her hand on the wood of the loom. It is freezing. The cold has penetrated the core of the timber, turning it into a material that feels more like iron than organic matter. She looks at the floor near the wall. The frost line has advanced. Earlier, the white powder of rime was confined to the edges of the room, a decorative border of ice. Now it has become an infestation. The white crystals have crept inward, covering the first 2 planks of the floor in a solid, glittering sheet. The frost does not look like snow. It looks like fungal growth, a geometric lichen made of ice that blooms in the dark. It covers the grain of the wood, smoothing out the rough texture, turning the floor into a slippery, treacherous surface. The mother stares at the line. It is a tide coming in, a tide that brings sleep and silence. She shifts her weight. Her felt boots make a dry, crunching sound on the wood, a sound that is startlingly loud in the quiet room. Crunch. The sound echoes, bouncing off the hard, frozen walls, returning to her as a sharp report. She looks at her boots. They are covered in a fine layer of gray dust and wool fibers, and now a dusting of white frost crystals around the toes. The cold is climbing her. It is trying to claim her feet, to anchor her to the floor. She forces herself to move. She cannot stand still. Stasis is the enemy. She walks towards the window. The air here is a physical assault. It hits her face with a numbing pressure, stripping the heat from her skin instantly. She brings her face close to the glass, or rather, to the wall of ice that covers the glass. The frost here has thickened into a complex geology. There are ridges and valleys of ice, plates of white mineral that overlap like the scales of a white dragon. The light from the fire catches the edges of the crystals, creating faint, blue sparks that glitter in the darkness. She places her palm against the frame of the window. The wood is wet with condensation that has frozen solid. It is slick and hard. She feels for the draft. There is no movement of air. The seal of ice is complete. The window has become part of the wall. The outside world is hermetically sealed away. She wonders for a brief, dangerous moment if the outside world still exists. Perhaps there is nothing out there but the white wind and the black sky. Perhaps the cabin is the only thing left in the universe. She shakes her head, a slow, heavy movement to dislodge the thought. The thought is a symptom of the cold. The cold whispers lies to the mind. It tells you to rest. It tells you to surrender. It tells you that the sleep is warm. She turns her back on the window. She faces the room. The bed dominates the view. It is a black mountain in the center of the gray plain. The midnight weave, the 10th and final layer, hangs heavy and still. It absorbs the red light of the fire, drinking it in, reflecting nothing. It looks incredibly heavy. The mother knows the weight of it. She feels the phantom weight of it in her arms, a memory of the lift. She visualizes the layers beneath the black wool. The bare skin, bristling and dark. The charcoal geometric, stiff and ordered. The indigo canvas, hard and salty. The white wool, soft and greasy. The red felt, dense and matted. The quilt, chaotic and lumpy. The green tartan, the brown hair, the gray wool. It is a strata of history, a geological record of her labor. She walks towards the bed. She moves with a slow, underwater grace, the air resistance palpable. She approaches the foot of the bed. She checks the seal of the black blanket against the floor. The frost has reached the hem. A line of white crystals lies against the black wool, a high-contrast border. The mother kneels. Her knees hit the wood with a dull thud. The pain is distant, dull, filtered through layers of numbness. She brushes the frost away with her hand. The crystals are dry and sandy. They scatter across the black floorboards. She tucks the hem of the midnight weave under slightly, rolling the heavy wool to create a fresh seal. The wool is stiff, frozen into the shape it settled in hours ago. It feels like bending lead. She holds it down for a moment, waiting for the heat of her hand to soften the fibers, to make them compliant. But her hand has no heat left. Her hand is as cold as the wool. She stands up. She leans over the foot of the bed and looks up the length of the mound. It is a smooth, undulating landscape of black. There is no movement. The stillness is absolute. Is the sleeper still breathing? The fear spikes in her chest, a sudden, cold shard of panic. She moves quickly to the head of the bed. She leans over the hood she created with the stiff black wool. She puts her ear to the opening. She listens. The silence of the room is a roaring noise, a high-pitched tinnitus. She forces her brain to filter it out. She listens for the organic sound, and then she hears it. Hoo-woo, a long, slow intake of air. It is faint, muffled by the 10 layers, distant as a wind in a deep cave, but it is there. Then the pause, the long, suspended pause, then the exhalation. Ha! The warm, moist air rises from the tunnel. It hits the mother's cheek. It is a shock. It is the breath of life. It smells of sleep and warm wool. She pulls back. The sleeper is alive. The sleeper is deep in the cycle. The mother's heart slows down. The panic recedes, replaced by the heavy, dull ache of fatigue. She straightens up. She places a hand on the black hood, smoothing the fabric. It is a gesture of affection, or perhaps just a gesture of maintenance. The wool is cold and slick under her fingers. She turns towards the hearth. The fire is the other heart of the room. It is the external heart. She must keep it beating. She walks across the room. The distance seems to have grown. The floorboards stretch out, a vast expanse of dark wood and white frost. She navigates the shadows. The shadows are heavy now. They seem to have mass. They crowd around her legs, clinging to her skirts. She reaches the hearth and looks at the fire. The peat briquettes she added, was it an hour ago? 2 hours, have burned down. They are now glowing blocks of geomorphic heat, retaining their shape but consisting entirely of ember. They are a deep, dark red, the color of garnet stones held up to a dying light. They pulse slowly, darkening as the air grows still, brightening as a microscopic draft touches them. The ash bed around them is thick and gray, a soft, powdery dune that insulates the coals. The mother picks up the poker. The iron is cold in her hand. She gently prods the center of the fire. The peat crumbles slightly, revealing a core of brilliant, blinding orange heat. It is a jewel of energy hidden in the ash. She stares at it. It is mesmerizing. It is the only bright thing left in the world. She feels the heat strike her face, a dry, intense wave that dries her eyes. She looks at the fuel basket. It is dangerously low, 2 pine knots, 1 large slab of peat, and a pile of dry bark, that is all. The night is far from over. She must ration. She must be a miser with the heat. She takes the dry bark. It is light, brittle, curling like scrolls of old paper. She places a few pieces on the glowing embers. They catch instantly, flaring up with a bright, crackling yellow flame. The sudden light is harsh, throwing sharp, dancing shadows against the back of the hearth. The mother watches the bark burn. It burns fast. It is a temporary flare, a signal fire. It offers light but little substance. She needs to save the peat for the hour of the wolf, for the time when the temperature drops to its absolute nadir. She saves the pine knots for the dawn, to wake the fire up when the light returns. If the light returns. She sits in the chair. The wood groans under her weight. She pulls her shawl tight. The wool is scratchy against her neck. She tucks her hands into her armpits to warm them. She curls her legs up, resting her heels on the rung of the chair, keeping her feet off the freezing floor. She curls into a ball, minimizing her surface area. She is mimicking the sleeper. She is trying to become a closed system. She stares at the bed. The black shape absorbs the flickering light of the bark fire. It does not change. It is a constant. The mother's eyes begin to lose focus. The room blurs. The vintage drawing style becomes rougher. The charcoal strokes heavier. The darkness in the corners seems to be moving, inching closer. She sees shapes in the shadows. Tall, thin figures watching her. She blinks. The figures are just the shadows of the loom, the shadows of the cupboard. She fights the sleep. The sleep is heavy. It pulls at her eyelids with physical fingers. It creates a fog in her mind. Her thoughts become slow and viscous. She thinks about the blankets. She counts them in her mind, a mantra of wool, midnight weave, bare skin, charcoal geometric, indigo canvas, white raw wool, red felt, patchwork quilt, green tartan, brown goat hair, gray wool, 10 layers, 10 shields. She wonders if 10 is enough. What if the cold is stronger than 10? What if the 11th layer is needed? But there is no 11th layer. The chest is empty. She looks at the chest in the corner. The lid is still open, a dark mouth. It is empty. She scraped the bottom. She took the void itself and draped it over the bed. There is nothing left to give. She listens to the house. The house is talking. It makes small, sharp sounds, click, tick, crack. The nails are freezing. The sap in the wood is freezing. The stones in the foundation are freezing. The house is contracting, shrinking in on itself, trying to present a smaller target to the cold. The wind is silent outside. The silence is the loudest thing of all. It presses against the walls, a heavy, suffocating blanket of air. The mother starts to hum again. M. The sound vibrates in her chest. It is a lifeline. It connects her to her own body. She feels the vibration in her ribs. As long as she can hum, she is warm enough. If the humming stops, the cold wins. She changes the pitch. Low, high, low. It is a song without a melody, a song of pure existence. She looks at the frost on the floor. It has moved again. It is now past the loom. It is creeping towards the table legs. It is a slow-motion flood. She watches a single crystal form on a dark knot of wood. It starts as a tiny speck, then grows a branch, then another, fracturing into a perfect six-sided star. It is beautiful. It is perfect. It is deadly. It is the signature of the end. She realizes she has been sitting too long. Her legs are numb. The feeling has drained out of them, leaving them heavy and wooden. She needs to stand. She needs to force the blood to move. She uncurls her legs. She places her boots on the floor. The sound is dull. She pushes herself up. Her body protests. Every joint is a rusty hinge. Her back is a solid block of pain. She stands swaying for a moment, waiting for the dizziness to pass. The room spins, the bed, the fire, the door, the frost, a carousel of charcoal and ice. She steadies herself. She takes a step. She resumes the patrol, the loop, the circle. She walks to the door. She checks the bar. It is frozen in place. Iron fused to wood. She checks the crack at the bottom. She stuffed it with rags hours ago. The rags are stiff with ice. They have become part of the door. She touches them. They are hard as stone. She moves to the window. The ice wall is thicker. The blue sparks are gone. The fire is too low to reflect in them. Now the ice is just a gray, matte surface. She leans her forehead against the frame. She closes her eyes. She can feel the cold leaching into her brain. It clears her thoughts. It strips away the fear, leaving only a cold, hard logic. Keep the fire, keep the seal, keep moving. She moves to the bed, the black monolith. She walks around it. She trails her hand along the midnight weave. The fabric is so cold it feels wet, but it is dry. It is chemically dry. She reaches the corner where the bare skin bulges underneath. She pats the black wool. Pat, pat, a sound of comfort, a sound of reassurance. I am here, she whispers. Her voice is a croak, dry and cracked. I am here. The whisper dies in the heavy air. The room swallows it instantly. There is no echo. The wool absorbs the sound. The mother feels a sudden, profound loneliness. She is the only living thing in the universe. The sleeper is not really here. The sleeper is in a different world, a world of dreams and warmth. She is alone in the ice. She stumbles slightly. She catches herself on the bed frame. The fatigue is a physical weight on her back. She feels like she is carrying the bare skin again. She feels like she is carrying the chest. She writes herself. She cannot fall. If she falls, she will not get up. The floor is waiting. The frost is waiting to embrace her, to cover her in white lace. She forces herself to walk back to the hearth. The fire is her companion. The fire is her child. She must feed it. She looks at the basket, the large slab of peat. It is time. The cold is at its peak. This is the dead of night. She picks up the slab. It is heavy, dense as a brick of gold. She places it on the embers. She positions it carefully, banking it against the back wall of the hearth. She watches. The embers are low but hot. The peat begins to smoke. It will take time to catch. It is a slow fuel. She needs it to last. She blows on the embers. Woo, woo. Her breath is a bellows. The ash flies up, coating her face in gray dust. The embers glow brighter. A small flame catches the corner of the peat block. It holds. She stands up. She turns to the room. The new flame casts a long, wavering shadow from her figure. The shadow stretches across the floor, reaching the bed, reaching the window. It is a giant shadow, a guardian spirit. She looks at the frost line. It has paused. The heat from the new log is pushing it back just a fraction of an inch. A tiny victory. She walks to the center of the room. She stands between the fire and the bed. She is the bridge. She is the conduit. She looks at her hands. They are trembling, not from cold, but from exhaustion. The muscles are firing randomly, small spasms of electricity in the flesh. She clasps them together, locking the fingers. She creates a knot of bone and skin. She closes her eyes. She listens to the silence. It is not empty. It is full of the sound of the earth freezing. It is a low geological hum. The sound of water turning to stone. The sound of air turning to glass. She sways to the rhythm of the freeze. She is a pendulum in the dark. She opens her eyes. The room is still there. The charcoal drawing is still there. The black bed is still there. She takes a step towards the bed. She needs to check the tunnel again. She needs to hear the breath. That sound is the only thing that keeps her standing. She walks, step, crunch, step, crunch. She reaches the head of the bed. She leans down. She puts her ear to the black hood. Haya. The breath is warm. The breath is steady. The sleeper endures. The mother straightens up. She looks at the window. Is it her imagination, or is the blackness outside slightly less absolute? Is there a subtle shift in the tone of the gray? She stares at the ice. No, it is still dark. The dawn is hours away. But the thought of dawn gives her a spark of strength. The sun will return. It must return. She resumes the patrol. Round and round. A moon orbiting a dark planet. She walks the line. She guards the seal. She keeps the watch. She is the mother. She is the wrapper. She is the last blanket. The hours of the deep night have stretched into a duration that feels less like the passage of time and more like the accumulation of weight. The cabin, buried beneath the crushing pressure of the winter atmosphere, exists in a state of suspended reality. The silence is absolute, a vacuum that has swallowed the wind, the creaking of the timber, and the crackle of the fire, leaving only a dense, ringing stillness that presses against the ears like deep water. In this vintage, charcoal-drawn world, the lines of reality have blurred. The shadows in the corners have merged with the solid objects, softening the edges of the loom, the cupboard, and the table, turning them into indistinct shapes of dark gray and heavy slate. The only sharp thing remaining in the room is the cold. It is a crystalline presence, a geometry of ice that defines the air. The mother sits in the chair by the hearth. She has ceased her patrol. The orbit is complete. She has walked the perimeter of the room until the floorboards know the weight of her boots by heart. Now she is still. She has become a part of the furniture, a statue carved from wood and wool and weariness. Her hands rest on her lap, the fingers interlaced, the knuckles pale and swollen. She is not sleeping. To sleep is to surrender the watch. She is existing. She is holding the space. Her eyes are open, fixed on the great black monolith that rises from the center of the floor. The bed, the central feature of the landscape. It is no longer a bed in any functional sense. It is a geological formation, a tiered mountain of insulation constructed to defy the laws of thermodynamics. The midnight weave, the 10th and final layer, covers the structure in a shroud of light-absorbing wool. It creates a smooth, black dome that hides the chaotic history of the layers beneath. The mother looks at it, and in her mind, she sees the cross-section. She sees the stratigraphy of survival. She performs the mental inventory, a litany of the barriers she has erected against the void. Deepest down at the core is the sleeper, the source of the heat, the biological engine that must be protected. The sleeper is wrapped in the first layer, the gray wool, the foundation, the scratchy, honest fabric of the ancestors, smelling of dry dust and ancient sheep. It holds the immediate air, the skin-warmed pocket that is the first line of defense. Above that, the second layer, the brown goat hair, the coarse, oily mat that presses down on the gray, sealing the gaps. It is the layer of density, the layer that mimics the earth. It creates the first heavy seal. Above that, the third layer, the green tartan, the grid of moss and bark, the pattern of order, the soft wool that traps the air in its twisted fibers, creating the loft, the breathing room. It is the layer of memory, of summers spent in the high pastures. Above that, the fourth layer, the patchwork quilt, the chaos of history, the velvet, the broadcloth, the cotton batting, the lumpy, organic layer that breaks the airflow, creating a maze of insulation. It is the layer of the family, the scraps of old lives stitched together to protect the new life. Above that, the fifth layer, the red felt, the slab of rust-colored wool, the boiled, pressed, impenetrable mat, the layer of weight, the layer that compresses the quilt, squeezing the air into a thin, warm film. It is the shield of iron and blood. Above that, the sixth layer, the white raw wool, the cloud, the grease, the lanolin-rich barrier that repels moisture, the layer that breathes, the layer that manages the humidity of the breath. It is the layer of the animal, the sheep in the snow. Above that, the seventh layer, the indigo canvas, the navel blanket, the stiff, salty sheet of linen and wool, the structural layer, the layer that creates the hard shell, the windbreak. It is the layer of the sea, cold and unyielding. Above that, the eighth layer, the charcoal geometric, the black diamonds, the double weave of heavy stone wool, the layer of symbols, the layer that locks into the canvas, creating friction, creating a bond. It is the layer of the mountain. Above that, the ninth layer, the bare skin, the beast, the fur, the chaos of the wild brought indoors, the dense undercoat and the stiff guard hairs, the layer of heat retention, the layer that remembers the hibernation. It is the layer of the cave. And finally, the 10th layer, the midnight weave, the void, the black wool of the deep night, the smooth, heavy drape that seals the entire system, the layer that hides the sleeper from the eyes of the frost, the layer of silence. The mother recites this list in her mind. It is a prayer, it is a spell. As long as the layers hold, the center will not freeze. She looks at the tunnel at the head of the bed, the small, dark aperture she sculpted from the stiff black wool. She cannot hear the breath from here. The distance is too great and the silence is too heavy, but she knows it is there. She can see the faint, ghostly wisp of vapor that rises from the opening every few seconds. Puff, pause, puff. It is a signal smoke from a distant settlement. It tells her that the fire inside the mountain is still burning. She turns her head slowly towards the hearth. The movement is stiff, her neck muscles protesting with a dull ache. The fire is low. The large slab of peat she added has burned down to a glowing, solid block of heat. It does not flame anymore. It pulsates. It is a deep, dark red, the color of a dying star. It emits a steady, radiant warmth that barely reaches her knees. The ash bed around it is thick and white, a soft dune that insulates the coals, prolonging their life. The fire is in its final phase. It is in the endurance phase. She looks at the fuel basket. It is empty. There is nothing left, no pine knots, no bark, no peat. She has used it all. She has fed the fire everything she had. Now it is up to the embers. They must last. They must hold the line until the sun returns. If the sun returns. She looks at the floor. The frost has advanced. The white tide of rime has crept past the table legs, past the loom. It is now halfway to the hearth. It covers the floorboards in a glittering, abrasive carpet of ice. The wood grain is lost beneath the crystals. The mother can feel the cold radiating from the floor, a low-level radiation that seeks the weakness in her boots. She curls her toes. They are numb. She rubs her knees. They are cold stone. She realizes that she is the 11th layer. She is the final blanket. She is the one who is not on the bed but who surrounds it. She is the layer of consciousness. The wool and the fur and the felt can trap heat, but they cannot care. They cannot watch. They cannot will the heat to stay. Only she can do that. She is the wrapper of the mind. She closes her eyes for a moment. The darkness behind her eyelids is not black. It is a swirling gray, full of afterimages of the fire and the frost. She feels the house settling around her. It is a slow, crushing sensation. The heavy timbers of the roof are pressing down, weighted by tons of snow. The walls are squeezing in, the wood contracting in the freeze. The house is trying to become a solid block of ice. She is the anomaly in the center. She and the sleeper are the flaws in the crystal. She opens her eyes, a sound. A tiny, sharp sound, click. It came from the window. She turns her head. The window is a wall of white ice, opaque and thick. But there is a change. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the tone of the darkness. The gray of the ice is no longer the flat, dead gray of the deep night. It has a faint blue quality. A deep, deep indigo resonance. The mother stares at it. Her heart beats a fraction faster. Is it a trick of the mind? Is it the hallucination of a starved brain? She focuses on the edge of the window frame. The light is definitely changing. It is not bright. It is not warm. But it is different. The sun is still far below the horizon, but its ghost is beginning to haunt the upper atmosphere. The black sky is turning to blue. The dawn is coming. It is not a dawn of golden light and singing birds. It is a dawn of slate and steel. It is the return of the gray world, but it is a return. The night is ending. The cycle is turning. She lets out a long breath. The vapor cloud is thick, white, and heavy. It hangs in the air before her, drifting slowly towards the dying fire. She watches it dissolve. She feels a sudden, overwhelming wave of fatigue. The adrenaline of the vigil is fading, replaced by the crushing weight of the exhaustion. Her body wants to shut down. Her head droops. Her chin touches her chest. She jerks her head up. No, not yet. The cold is most dangerous now. The hour before the dawn is the coldest hour. This is when the fires die. This is when the hearts stop. She must stay awake. She must witness the light. She forces herself to stand. She needs to move. She needs to prove to the room that she is still the master of the space. She places her hands on the arms of the chair. She pushes. Her body rises, unfolding like a rusted hinge. She stands in the center of the shrinking circle of warmth. She walks to the bed. Her steps are slow, ceremonial. She approaches the black monolith. She reaches out and touches the midnight weave. It is freezing. It feels like touching the hull of a ship that has been at sea in the Arctic. But it is dry. The seal holds. She walks around the bed, her hand trailing on the black wool. She is tracing the perimeter of her success. She reaches the head of the bed. She looks into the tunnel. Haya. The breath is there. It is steady. It is the metronome of the house. The sleeper has made it through the night. The sleeper has survived the weight of the 10 layers. The sleeper will wake. The mother stands at the head of the bed and looks towards the window. The blue tint is stronger now. The frost on the glass is glowing with a faint, spectral luminescence. The details of the room are beginning to emerge from the shadows. She can see the texture of the loom again. She can see the grain of the wood on the cupboard. The charcoal drawing is gaining definition. The heavy blacks are lifting, revealing the grays underneath. She walks back to the hearth. She looks at the fire. The peat block is a mound of white ash, but in the center there is still a core of red, a small, stubborn heart of heat. It has done its job. It has carried them through. She takes the poker and gently covers the red core with the surrounding ash. She banks the fire. She puts it to sleep. It will keep now. It will wait for the fresh fuel of the morning, for the wood she will bring in from the shed when the light is strong enough to open the door. She turns the chair around. She places it so it faces the bed but also faces the window. She sits down. She wraps her shawl tightly around her body. She tucks her legs up, resting her chin on her knees. She is a small, gray bundle in the growing light. She looks at the bed. The black wool of the midnight weave is beginning to reflect the faint blue light from the window. The shape of the mound is becoming clearer. It looks less like a tomb now and more like a cocoon, a chrysalis of wool waiting for the emergence. The wind outside begins to stir. It is a different wind than the night wind. It is lighter, faster. It brushes against the walls with a whispering sound. Swish, swish. It is the morning breeze sweeping the stagnant air of the night away. The house creaks in response, a sound of relief. The timbers are expanding slightly as the pressure of the absolute dark lifts. The mother closes her eyes. She does not sleep. She drifts. She floats in the space between waking and dreaming. She feels the weight of the blankets in her mind. She feels the texture of each layer. The scratch, the oil, the softness, the stiffness, the cold, the heat. They are a part of her. She is woven into them. She thinks of the moment she will wake the sleeper. It is hours away. She will peel back the layers one by one. She will remove the midnight weave, folding the darkness away. She will remove the bare skin, returning the beast to the floor. She will remove the charcoal, the indigo, the white. She will excavate the sleeper from the history of the night. She will find the warmth preserved in the core, a treasure she buried to save. But not yet. Now is the time for holding. Now is the time for the final silence. The light in the room grows. The frost on the floor stops glittering and becomes a flat, matte white. The shadows retreat to the corners, hiding under the table and behind the chest. The charcoal aesthetic softens. A faint, very faint hue of blue returns to the world. The vintage drawing is being colored in, very slowly, with a pale, cold wash of watercolor. The mother breathes in, out. Her breath matches the rhythm of the sleeper. 2 breaths in the cold room, 2 sparks in the vast winter. She does not move, she does not speak. She simply watches. The frost holds its line, the fire holds its heat, the wool holds its air. The duty is fulfilled. The night is over. The wrapping is complete. The story has no end, only a pause. The cycle of the cold is eternal, and the vigilance of the mother is eternal. As the light touches the foot of the black bed, the mother allows her head to rest against the back of the chair. She keeps her eyes open, just a slit, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of blue light. The room is silent, the bed is warm, the cold is outside. And the mother waits.